Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the workshop to order. Mayor Roscoe,
Present.
Vice Mayor Kaplan,
Here.
Councilmember London,
Here.
Councilmember McCormick is not with us, Councilmember Moss is not, Councilmember Sardinius, no, Councilmember Vasquez.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we do have a quorum. The next item is, may we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Chad, lead us in the pledge.
So nice. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is public comments.
For the record, we don't have a quorum, but it's a workshop, so we can still continue.
Okay. First speaker is Michael Davey.
Is he permitted to speak here?
Wow.
Can I leave now?
Oh, please. Miss Yed. Mike Davey, 50 Ocean Lane Drive. Thank you all for putting this workshop together. Thank you to the manager and staff. Look, I just wanted to make a couple general comments. I make them all the time. I know you're not setting trim notice today, but I will not be here at the July 18th meeting, so I would advocate that you set that trim notice as high as possible. Give yourselves flexibility for September when you come back. Yes, Ed, I know that you think that if we set it high, we're going to spend all the money. That's nonsense. But anyway, you're going to make that statement later on. Also, as to a lot of what's going on, we're hearing a lot of misinformation about things in the budget that aren't actually in the budget, claims that there are positions that have been put forward by the manager that are not there. So I just wanted to educate the public that let's make sure, attend these meetings. I appreciate that people are showing up at these things, but people should be coming out. It's their money. They should be asking the questions. They should be here. I think what the managers put together is pretty comprehensive. I think you got a lot to talk about tonight. But let's get going. Let's deal in facts, folks. We don't need to deal in misinformation and disinformation. Let's deal in facts. I thank you all for everything and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
And happy birthday, Mayor.
All right.
All right, next speaker is Amaryllis Fridegotto.
Yeah, Fridegotto. So good evening,
What you
council
said.
members. Fridegotto, yes. I'm manager. My name is Amarilli Fridegotto, key resident at the 550 Ocean Drive, founder and director of the Key Biscayne Piano Festival Community Group. I just want to say thank you for supporting the Key Biscayne Piano Festival since its inception in 2018. Currently, we have applied for funding for our sixth season, 23-24, for a total of 5 concerts, the traditional holiday season orchestra below the village Christmas tree in the Monaco pools, and 4 concerts at the Crossbridge Church. The feedback we received during our last season, 22-23, was outstanding for our quality and level of performance. Some highlights: the Key Biscayne Piano Festival has delighted the unconditional lovers of music and has inspired many others to the magic of it. In all our events, we incorporate the Key Biscayne youth in community service activities so they can learn and appreciate these arts. We have full house attendance per concert with ages ranging from 8 to 90 years old. During all these years together, we have been able to project Key Biscayne as a musical arts city at an international level, thanks to the musical prestige of the pianists and artists invited. We have counted on the presence and support of different consulates and the respective trade and cultural centers, such as Italy, Germany, Britain, France, Spain, and Belgium. We have been blessed with the support of many businesses in the Key, such as the Irlander News, Windows Channel, Winn-Dixie, Golden Hog, and Botter's Grill, to name a few. Miami-Dade County Cultural Affairs Department, the Knight Foundation, and the Key Biscayne Community Foundation have been critical to our growth by providing funding and technical support over the years. The Key Biscayne Piano Festival has formed strategic alliances with renowned institutions and artists, such as the Miami International Piano Festival. In closing, the Key Biscayne Piano Festival family is grateful for your support in the past, and we trust that we can continue to count on the village to help us bring out these beautiful concerts to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Susie Westfall. Hey there.
Susan Westfall, 525 Allendale Road, Key Biscayne, 33149. We all know that one. I really want to just come and thank you guys as you're putting your budgets together. Like the piano festival, I'm here for City Theater and actually all the different arts and cultural organizations that are really finding the Key as a place to bring art to our community, of all ages. It's really remarkable. I will be going to Vail actually this weekend, where that tiny little community is sponsoring a full summer of dance and music and art and all these presentations. And frankly, our community is so special, and our citizens are so interesting, as are our visitors. So the idea that our island can become, as it has been growing, a destination for people traveling from their backyards or from around the world, because there's just a plethora of programming that is enticing them. The Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau has just expanded their budget for the same reason, because people want to come to Florida. Well, there's more than our beaches here to bring them here and create memorable moments. So City Theater has been has been on the Key since 1996 doing programming. We're expanding our programming this year from performance-based to readings across from, I think, starting in the winter through the summer, in addition to some writing workshops, which it came to my attention that was something that people were asking for. The community center writing programs and art programs and dance programs are exploding, frankly, because we have such a diverse community that's interested in participating in arts, in addition to being audiences for arts. So I want to thank you all for considering that as you're putting your budgets together, because a healthy community is represented by the kind of culture that it supports. And we have such a remarkable island that we're very happy to be engaged in this. And as a newly retired person, but on my, I'm on the board, but as a newly retired person on Key Biscayne, I can't wait to actually be able to have time now to participate in all the things that we offer here and never leave the island again. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. My next speaker is Joseph Barcy.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Joe Barcy, 1121 Crandon Boulevard, and considering the time, I wanted to first say thank you very much for this opportunity. Today, I would like to talk to you about the remarkable benefits of the Boy Scouts of America. For over 100 years, the organization has been transforming the lives of children, shaping them into responsible, confident, contributing members of society. Scouting, as you probably know, instills core values and builds character. Through time-tested principles, Scouts learn the importance of duty, honesty, integrity, and respect. These values become the foundation for which they will navigate the challenges and decisions that they will make throughout their lives. Scouting is a powerful environment for youth development. Scouts learn essential life skills as leadership, teamwork, empathy, problem solving, engaging in activities like camping, hiking, food drives, many other community service projects. These programs encourage love of nature, environmental stewardship, fostering appreciation for the outdoors. Scouts take on the challenges and earn merit badges for various achievements such as first aid, CPR, fire safety, and many more. We have several Scouts in our newly pack that will graduate from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts. And with your continued support and help, we will grow the Key Biscayne Cub Scout pack to include a Boy Scout Troop 149. Scouting requires various equipment, as you can imagine, gear, supplies, outdoor activities for camping and other events. Funding beyond our own fundraising helps procure some of these items to maintain things like tent, pinewood, derby tracks, cooking gear, safety equipment, and other scouting material. Also, funding is essential for developing and enhancing new scouting programs that couldn't have been possibly imagined 100 years ago, such as cybersecurity, internet safety, etc., including the creation of educational materials and financial scholarships to ensure that scouting remains accessible to youth of diverse backgrounds. With the support enables people who may have financial constraints to participate in scouting activities. As the Cub Master for our newly formed Key Biscayne Cub Scout Pack 149, I'd like to thank the support of this organization and this governing body and for the support we have received. I also would like to extend my thanks to Chief Lang of the Fire Department, Chief Sosa of the Police Department, Village Manager Key Biscayne, Mr. Steve Williamson, and as well to you, Honorable Mayor Joe Roscoe. Thank you very much for all you've done.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Next speaker is Michelle Esteves.
Gotta wear my hat, one of my many hats. Good evening, Michelle Esteves, 425 Grape Tree Drive, 204. I am here on behalf of 4th of July Parade Committee. I would like to thank you for the support on behalf of the committee. If it wasn't because the village started to assisting us with and funding the parade, probably the parade will have not continued. And I know, again, I keep saying that I'm sure Todd doesn't want to take over the responsibility. Unfortunately, we have many of the participants, especially the bands, the horses, rental of the stage, that the cost has been going up. Just each of the bands cost us probably around $4,000, and we have 3 bands. One of the bands come all the way down from Baltimore, even. So I'm asking here that the $30,000 contribution that you have allocated in the budget for many years, if you can raise to 35. We do our best to ask for donations, contributions, and sponsors, selling our t-shirts. By the way, they are at sale every day at Winn-Dixie from now on until Monday. Okay, so please support the parade and buy the t-shirts. We are still open to participate. I think that we're going to have around 55 this year in the parade. So that is what I am requesting, that to please to add $5,000. This year parade, we're estimating that it's going to cost us around $48,000. So thank you for the support.
Is that free advertisement you got there? Thank you for all you guys do. It's your 64th year, right?
64, sorry.
Yeah. Not your 64th, but Michelle. Andy Herrera.
Good afternoon, Mayor, good afternoon, Council. Andy Herrera, 250 Fernwood Road. I'm here today just to congratulate you all for the great effort building and this the budget that is going to be proposed. So, I saw a lot of improvement there, a lot of money invest to our children, very important, which I appreciated that. And my concern on this specific budget is about children, related to children budgets, especially the sport field facilities in our village. One of the things on that budget is the $1.2 million investment at St. Anne's Field. Myself, my family, and many residents are really concerned on the conditions of the St. Anne's sport field. It's not well maintained, holes, bumpy. Kids are able to almost twisting the ankles there. It's not fit for any sports. There's no drinkable water. There's no shade areas there. And then I would like to, you guys, whoever is responsible with the contract with St. Anne's, the village, St. Anne's, whoever is responsible, please to pay attention to this important. This is those are our children's. The lighting conditions are being abandoned for years. We're using generators, leases, polluting the environment. So we have to take a quick look into that before the next school year comes by. And then before doing an investment of $1.2 million on that field, during the summertime, we have time, plenty time for our children, the children that play rugby, soccer, and St. Anne's facilities to coordinate with the responsible personnel and department, because this is abandoned, this is negligent, and I know you guys are not even aware of that, but when it's dry, it's like a Sahara Desert. When rain, it's like living in the Everglades. They come so muggy, and then that's not acceptable. We have resources for our children to enjoy and to be safe, and that is a liability. I don't know who is to be responsible if something happens to our children. We don't want anything like that, but I would love you guys to address it and to look into who is responsible at this moment to maintain that facility and needs to be held accountable, because our children are at risk, and we don't want anything to happen to them, and we want them to enjoy it and to be healthy, and that's my main concern. I would like you guys to pay close attention into that, and then hopefully the next coming school year, our children will be enjoying a good facility and it's be properly prepared. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Josie Valdez Hurtado.
Good evening. I'm Josie Valdez Hurtado, 600 Great Tree Drive, and I am here to speak to you about what I read in the budget. My introduction was going to be different, but since I heard what Mr. Davies said, I would like to remind you of the tactics that were used when Vision 2040 were being criticized by us. The highly professional individuals who had an opinion were called basically ignorance because they couldn't understand what they were reading. And here we are again. We're being accused of the same thing, that we don't understand what the manager wrote. I believe I know enough to understand what I read. I am not a financial expert. I am not an accountant, but I do understand what it is that I marked in this budget that I object to. So I'm going to share with you. The two main threats to our island are not recognized in the main priorities that I saw on the pages that I marked. On the proposed budget plan before you, out of the 11 focus areas being recognized as main priorities, on the proposed budget, for year 2024, flooding and sea level rise occupies place 8. Resiliency and sustainable infrastructure occupies number 9. Zoning and compliance, quote, to support village goals is number 3. On page 45, under the Building and Zoning Department, again, quote, tailor zoning and code compliance to support village goals, unquote, shows as number 2 out of the 6 areas identified. Any deviation from what should be a detailed step-by-step plan to attain lasting sustainability and resiliency is nothing but a totally irresponsible approach from you, elected officials, administrative staff, and uninformed citizens. It is impossible to begin towards resolving the conditions we already face without identifying and addressing as number 1 and number 2 the problems to resolve. No time, energy, or funds should be spent on perfectly functional shopping centers or to increase sports facilities for non-residents or to invest over and over in public parks. I believe that the village needs to aggressively seek or enhance existing state, city, and county alliances to help resolve the dangerous floodings, the bacteria-contaminated beaches, the outdated bridges, and the overcrowded streets, and of course the FPL services. These serious and dangerous issues will definitely bring down property values, as will the unbearable traffic, the lake-like parking lots, and the increasing use of village facilities by non-residents. Key Biscayne is blessed to have a deep well of professionals ready to volunteer for boards. We need experts in related fields of science who will propose and help to implement drastic, long-lasting, and viable solutions based on scientific data. Not experts in urban development and marketing who will provide us with building permits. At the end of the day, it is not important how much we love Key Biscayne or how long we have been here. What matters is what it is that we're doing now. For you, council, your votes are very important for the legacy that you're going to leave. And honestly, having people that are trying to do the best for Key Biscayne downplay their support for good causes or identify them as enemies is not doing well for Key Biscayne. I am part of the newly formed Association for Neighbors in Key Biscayne. I'm very proud that I was asked to be part of it. And trust me, we are not your enemies. We can be allies, but this kind of statement to open this meeting was totally uncalled for. And I believe all of you should criticize him in your private moments and stop that kind of aggressive behavior toward us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Steve Simon.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Administration. Steve Simon, 335 Harbor Lane. First, let me commend the administration on the layout and readability of the 2 budget documents. Tonight, I hope to convince the council and manager that these budget documents serve to underscore a theme that runs throughout. That theme is land acquisition, and the assigned priority level on a scale of 1 to 5 should be a 1. I will then tie in the manager's budget, page 33, entitled Resource Efficiency Initiatives, to put a rather unique proposal before you. The theme of land acquisition appears either implicitly or explicitly on the strategic focus 3-page spreadsheet under improved CRS rating. Historically, the limiting factor on improving our score has been the limited amount of park and open space. Under engaging an active program in public spaces, objective, acquire additional athletic venues, adapt Harbor Park for age-appropriate sports. Under develop and execute the resilient infrastructure plan, Action, develop land easement and acquisition strategy. On the budget estimate, the long document, the 46-page long document, there's the page SWOT analysis. Opportunities, athletic fields and village. Weaknesses, athletic field space. Threats, lack of diverse revenue sources. Under fiscal year 24 focus areas, increase access to sports venues. PROS department FY24 focus. Acquire additional athletic venues. For more emphasis, aside from these budget documents, Council recently approved the EAR report, which says public recreation facilities, the village shall actively seek to acquire sufficient additional acreage to meet the standard of 2.5 acres per 1,000 people permanent population. The village shall continue to pursue the acquisition of additional parkland. And a plan dated last month adopted by Council. There's a page that says, within the page, proximity to recreational facilities was cited as the most important factor for residents deciding whether to enroll their children in a sport program or class. Turning towards the elements of the proposal, by way of background, we have two dedicated funding sources, both of which I believe can help purchase land. And given the price of land, the question becomes, where do we find sufficient revenue? We have Ordinance 2016-5, the Land Acquisition Trust Fund, that says that at least 1% of ad valorem revenues will be placed into that fund each year, and the purpose of it is for acquiring parks and recreational lands. We have Stormwater Utility Ordinances 1993-11 and 2020-08. The village has the authority to plan, construct, operate, and maintain stormwater management systems. Well, implicitly to me, and I would love for the manager and the attorney to comment later, when the manager has an item entitled restructure stormwater fees, if you are authorized to construct, don't you need land? And therefore, that could be a funding mechanism through stormwater fees for land acquisition. Tonight's request, the proposal, focuses only on the Land Acquisition Trust Fund component, which has a clause saying the PROS Lands Trust Fund shall receive monies from various sources, including monies accepted by the village as private grants and donations for acquisition of parks and open space. I ask that Council and the manager to support an increase in the ad valorem tax revenue that goes into that Land Acquisition Trust Fund from the existing 1% to 2% if and only if a certain condition can be met, which is through private sector donations, we can match that extra 1%. Can we try this approach for the coming fiscal year and find out if philanthropy, the private sector, can be part of the village manager's diversify revenue sources and pursue other people's money plan? Who knows? Maybe eventually, working together, we will finally get a bayfront park. So when you set the cap on the millage rate tonight, please at least temporarily allow for an extra 1% for land acquisition. Then let's roll up our sleeves between now and the first budget hearing in September to lay the groundwork for a private sector run philanthropy campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Ms. Tainter.
You got your marching orders.
Hi, good evening. Ann Tainer, 170 Ocean Lane Drive. Thank you very much for supporting the History Society. I hope you will continue to do that. We continue to try to expand our program and educate the people on the history of the Key. But I just got some unhappy news before I came, so I'll give you the good news and the bad news. So the good news is the fire truck, the antique fire truck has been broken. The good news is they can fix it, have fixed it. The bad news is it's very expensive. So either you can put it in your budget, hopefully, to totally fix it, because this is a major part of the Key and always has been, or else you can increase our budget, and we had some left over from last year, and maybe we can negotiate with Eric. But I hope you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lucia Marin.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Lucia Marin, 765 Crandon Boulevard. I understand that building a budget is a complicated process, and you're only at the beginning of this journey, but I'm here to make it more complicated for you, because I'm also here to ask for you to consider penciling in funds for a potential public-private partnership. My husband and I are raising 2 young girls. My 9-year-old just finished the basketball and the baseball programs run by the village, which were amazing. And I also served as a part of the vision board, and I heard a lot of talk about the need for green space, for athletic fields, for resiliency issues, to upgrade our insurance rating, for decreased density, for everything. Basically, we need more land. And the urgency of that need wasn't really apparent to me until I saw it through the eyes of a parent in the youth program, where we had to take turns on the fields and where some of the players weren't allowed on the field until late at night. Parents of young children need to juggle the after-school activities, extracurricular activities during the week and after school, in between work and preparing dinner and all the rest. And the idea of having to drive to Virginia Key to take a kid to some sort of athletic practice is obviously not very enticing. And historically, we've missed out on a bunch of opportunities to purchase land that we could have used as bayfront parks or athletic fields. And I think we need to proactively search for ways to avoid this going forward. Most of us choose to live in Key Biscayne, not because it's the cheapest place in Miami, because it's certainly not, but because it's the greatest place to live, one of the greatest places to live in the country. We have amazing beaches, top-rated schools, top-rated municipal services, and with all that, we still have the lowest millage rate in the county. And I've been thinking for some time now, and I've found some neighbors who agree with me that we should try to go out and try to raise funds from our neighbors. But the idea would be a better sell to potential donors if we could get the village to agree to match the private funds that we raise. So as Dr. Simon mentioned, we currently place 1% of ad valorem revenue in the land acquisition trust every year, and we'd like to consider perhaps that you raising that by another percentage if we are able to match it with 1% from the private donations. So give us residents a chance to maybe mount a campaign and raise the funds. We clearly have a need for more green space, and we're surrounded by a lot of generous neighbors. So I think we should think big and at least give it a shot and try to make this happen. Something to consider.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. That is all that I have. We really thank you for being here. This is, as someone mentioned, a process that we're going through. This is just the very first piece of this. I think most cities don't do what we're doing, so this is our first shot at it at a high level, and we'd like the manager and the directors to walk us through what they are proposing. In the end, this body sitting here makes the decisions on this budget, and so this is an initial thrust at it. I think that the administration wants us, the elected officials, to start giving some direction, trying to point which way we want to go. And so this is part of the conversation today. At the end of the meeting, the manager and different directors will stay around and make sure that there are particular questions or particular items that you may not understand, also that they can share with you further information. So we look forward to that also. And with that, I will ask the manager to take us through the beginning here of tab 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor and council members, we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Our staff has put a lot of work into this budget estimate, and as the mayor just mentioned, we see this as a conversation. We've laid out an initial thought process through the budget estimate. We'll walk you through it, but I think what we're really seeing this as is the first step in a conversation to lead to an opportunity to come with a great budget to support our residents' needs and expectations in September. So first step, opportunity for a good conversation. As you see on the next slide, if you could please, we're going to present a budget estimate that aligns our limited resources to achieve our strategic goals. What I like to do as we walk out of here tonight is, after that discussion, is a good understanding where we want to go with the budget, begin to discuss about the supporting millage cap. I think we'll come back on July 18th to formalize that, because as you know, the property appraiser only provides the updated property values on July 1st. So right now we are basing this number on what we received on June 1st. So in a couple days, the numbers will change. However, the idea and the flow of the budget remains the same. So with that, next slide. This is the timeline. So as you can see right now, budget workshop right there in the middle, the big green area. Again, as I mentioned, we like to set or begin to set the budget millage cap. And then we want to walk out of here with your guidance, your direction, so that I and the directors can go back, refine the budget, and then come back in September, as you see as we move to the right. Next slide. This is our agenda. You can see as we walk through, most of it is the, as I like to call it, the Benjamin show. But obviously, I'll be in there with it, and as necessary, as the mayor said, the directors are available to discuss specific items that relate to their areas of operation.
Yeah, and let me add that most of the people here are very familiar with this budget process, but for other people watching this at home or later on, there will be two budget hearings in September 12th and September 26th.
Yeah, 28th.
So you have all the month of July, all the month of August to understand the budget, to talk to your council about what your priorities are and what you think. And then we have the formal process that we set the budget on those dates in September.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'm glad you actually had me go back to this slide, because I think it's an important thing that I glossed over there. Is you can see in one of the orange lines right there above the dotted line going to the right, we are actually transitioning to a new budget system. It's called ClearGov. And not only does it make it easier for our folks to do the budget, but also what it does is much more clarity and much more transparency, as when we're ready to go full live on the budget, folks actually will be able to go into the budget itself, both you all as well as our residents, and understand where the money is and where it's going. So we're preparing that right now, and then by September, we'll have that ready to go. So I think that's also not only a simplicity, but also transparency, which is very important to us. Let's jump through a couple slides, Joe. This is our team, the important team of how we work together as a council and administration, but most importantly, we have our residents on top, because in the end, that's who we serve, and that's why we are here as a village. Next slide. You all seen this before. Obviously, I just want to put this up because this is the strategic context under which we operate. We discussed this during the strategy workshop. But again, I want to make sure everyone understands it. This is how we get to where we're trying to go. Looks like we have some donuts being delivered to the back. He was quick though, wasn't he?
Usually it's a pie from Ann, but something went wrong tonight, obviously.
So next slide, something that we're very proud of. It's been quite a exciting year this last year, and as you can see, quite a things that we've accomplished, a lot of highlights. I attribute that to a very hardworking and talented staff. I appreciate them every day, and I also appreciate the guidance we get from council as well as our residents to move in this direction. So we had quite an exciting last year, and as you can see up here, we could probably put more, but I think we've got quite a few things we accomplished to support our residents' needs. Next slide. So as we were thinking about the village theme, last year it was maintaining what we have while building for the future, and as to continue on with that creativity, we just flip that around. And it sounds funny, but in reality, it really is kind of the next step to what we're trying to do. We had a commitment last year to maintain what we have, because we know, particularly during COVID, a lot of things were left unmaintained. We had a lot of catching up to do. I think we've done quite a bit. We still have more to do, but I think now it's that transition into, it's time to start looking at some major infrastructure, such as the resilient infrastructure, looking at some of our roadways. So now we're looking to build for the future, but we never want to forget about maintaining what we have. Next slide. Again, we saw this during the strategy workshop. We put numbers against it because later we reference that in our worksheet so that you understand that every goal that we have relates back to one of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we have a very strategically based goals and objectives.
By the way, let's, somebody mentioned this, these are not in any particular order of priority.
No, they are not.
These are areas of focus, and this council, again, can change and enhance some of these, but they are not in any chronological order from 1 to...
You're talking this one right here, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I was actually going to say the same thing. These are not in an order. And again, once they're your top priorities, top focus, they are your top focus. And obviously, at sometimes one is more important at the other time, but in all, this is our goals and focus areas for the year. So with that, that sets the conditions of where we are, sets the directions of where we move, but coming out of our strategy session. Now what I'd like to do is bring up the CFO so he can talk about what our revenue projections are to date. Again, as I said before, taking consideration the 8.8% increase in tax value from what we received on June 1st.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. As Steve mentioned, on June 1st, the property appraiser gave us the news, as well as the other municipalities, of the taxable value increase. So we went from about 9.1 billion to 9.9 billion in taxable value. That's an 8.8% increase from prior years. I wanted to include this chart to kind of give perspective of where we've been and where we are now. So it wasn't that long ago we had those 3 straight years of negative, property value decline. And you talk about having some really tough budgeting decisions that we made during those years. Obviously now we've climbed out of that, and we've had 2 successful years of pretty positive percentage increase. On July 1st, although it falls on a weekend, I've been assured from the properties appraiser's office on Friday that they're going to give us the updated values, and I'll be sure to get those out to you guys so you can see where we rank. We're optimistic it'll be a little bit of an increase from the 8.8, but not too much, and we're comfortable budgeting right now with the 8.8 known factor that we have.
What's the over and under here?
What are the stakes?
You all boxed me in.
Second biggest is state revenue share. We've seen from the pandemic years coming out, strong economic activity. We get a portion of the sales tax revenue. So in budgeting for that, obviously we're optimistic. We look at the trends, but we don't want to get too giddy and think that these good times will last forever. So we've been kind of conservative in our estimates when dealing with our state revenue share. Charges for services, the biggest difference is the community center has really taken off since the pandemic as we've opened back up. We've opened up new resumed classes that we had that were temporarily paused and canceled. So we're optimistic that we're going to have more revenue leading into fiscal year 24 as the services get turned on and growth occurs in that community center. And lastly, interest income. The village has really benefited in these last 2 years as interest income the rates have gone up. The village has been investing our assets and our fund balances in very secure money market accounts. Right now, I think I've reported to you guys a few months ago, we were in the 4s. We just eclipsed now 5%. So we're earning more than 5% on our balances. Important to keep in mind when we get into the village's financial position of where we are, understand that every dollar that we have is invested, earning over 5% as well. So interest income will be a part of this budget as a revenue as well.
I want to pause here. I think this is a great graphic here. So, if you look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, okay, 4 years are in the negative or flat. So, people say, we just have more and more money and more increases. No, you really don't. You've had 2 really good years at 10% and at 8.8, but 4 years before were either negative or flat. So,
yeah, look at that 8.5 billion valuation. It took us 4 years just to get back to that.
Excuse me, Joe.
Yes, sir.
It went down by 5.2% for 3 years. Now, from the low year, we're up 16%. So overall, from going down there, we're up 16%, including going down those 3 years. So we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, we're in good shape. We're in good shape.
Yeah, the other thing I think I shared with you all the chart when the property appraiser released those values, and you look at us, are we in good shape compared to some other municipalities? And as you may have noticed, we didn't increase quite as rapidly as some of the others. So we invited the property appraiser's office earlier in the year to come talk to us, and we're kind of investigating in the granular, detailed parcels what's going on with our valuations. On the single-family, multifamily, our properties that are on the coast increasing at a more tepid pace than some of the other ones. So we want to get a better understanding of what's making up that big number. The 8.8 is overall, but why we're not going up as rapidly as some of those other municipalities.
I have a question, Ben. Basically, what do we have, about 30% of the people Key Biscayne have homestead exemptions?
Correct.
And those people can no go up higher than 3%, even if we go up 9%, whatever, correct?
Correct.
All the others can go up 10%.
Correct.
So they can go up maximum. Now, but they go up to get to the point when they're below, since it went up higher, faster in previous years, even though it goes up, goes down in those years, the people still, whoever at homestead was going to go up, has lived here for any time, correct?
That's correct, but they're not going up 3% because it's the lesser of 3% or inflation. Usually during these negative years, that number is also sometimes lower. So you see probably maybe they go up 1.5 or 2%. Yeah.
My point being is that even with Joe, even in the bad years, our thing went up because we're below the thing going up. So it really misleads people. First of all, they think we're going to raise taxes, whatever you have, 8.8 plus whatever.
Right.
When in fact, 30% of the people won't go up more than 3%. And I think that everybody should know that, that it's not going to go up to the max.
That's a great point, yeah.
You know, for everybody. Any other thing you have to tell us about that, which would be different than just looking at these numbers?
Just you mentioned about a third. That's pretty low if you look at some other municipalities. More residential communities, Pinecrest, Gable, they're about 80%. So it's much easier. They have probably a more smooth increase or decrease, whereas Key Biscayne seems to be very volatile. We've had years of 18% growth, and then we've had negative bigger numbers. So because we're only about a third, it makes that taxable value number much more volatile.
Thank you.
Sometime I'd be interested to see this reach back about maybe to 2005. Go back farther.
I did share that with you guys on June 1st when the values came out. I couldn't fit it all on this chart, but I'll circulate it again. Okay, so here's all the revenues broken out in terms of operating categories. For purpose of this, we kept the operational revenues above the line and other revenues below the line because those are kind of one-time hits, like a federal grant or refunding of a bond proceed that didn't want to skew the total number. So there you can see the growth from 2020 to what's being requested now in fiscal year 24.
You purposefully excluded the grants that were announced recently.
So with grant revenue, sometimes it's hard to budget ahead of time and know exactly what you're going to receive. We've made it mandate from the manager to apply for, you've heard us mention other people's money. So that's always a priority in any capital project we're doing, is to get outside funding before we do the easy decision, which is increase taxes. So we're obviously committed to doing it. However, I don't want to count a grant before we know for certain that it's going to arrive.
But didn't we get a lot of grants in 22?
Correct. And they were against capital projects, which is why you'll see in the later charts in CIP, we'll kind of go over the grants that we've already applied for. Okay. Just a quick overview on debt service. Now that our valuation is $9.9 billion, our debt capacity is 1% of that, which is $99 million. The debt we have outstanding right now is only $8 million. So we have a lot of availability underneath that debt cap of almost $91 million. So we've been paying off debt pretty quickly. You can look here. In parentheses is the interest rate we're paying, which looked good last year. Now, when I mention interest rates are 5%, these look really good. So I'll leave this slide open a little bit longer to let that sink in. But overall, we're in a strong financial position where you'll notice also our annual debt service as a percentage of our operating budget has decreased because of the refinancings we did with, I guess, good timing. I won't take credit. We got lucky with good timing.
Benjamin, can you go back to the prior slide? Your number there at the bottom right, 36,910, versus 37,994 is a 2.9%.
Ooh, Ed's quicker with the math, but yeah, eyeballing it about.
Okay.
Okay, here's, obviously, we don't just run the general fund. We have some other funds that I just want to give a quick update on. They obviously won't impact the millage discussion tonight, but I think it's just a good time to touch base and see where we are. So we have the Transportation Special Revenue Fund. The revenue sources of this are from the county with the CITT, the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, which gives money which help fund our freebie services. We've recently, you approved a new contract with Freebie to enhance those services as well and adding 2 vehicles. So that's the funding comes from external. We've been blessed that we had our population numbers actually increased when the rest of Dade County decreased in the latest census, which means we get a bigger share of that amount from the county. So that's really helped funding those enhanced services. The next one is the PROS, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Land Trust. Came up a couple times in public comment. The revenue source is the 1% of ad valorem. So I'm projecting we end fiscal year 23 with about $4.3 million, and that will go up to 4.6, more or less depending on where we leave the final millage, because it receives 1% of that, and it's also benefiting from all that money being invested, earning 5% interest as well. So those are the 2 revenue sources for the land trust. Then we have the Building Special Revenue Fund. You remember this is only fees for building permitting, certificate of occupancies, and lien searches, and these funds can only be used for operating that building fund. And then lastly, we have the 2 enterprise funds. We have the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, which is the stormwater utility fee. This past year, we changed the methodology of how we assess those fees, which are used to improve the stormwater system. And lastly, the solid waste system, which collects money for the garbage and recycling for single-family residences and obviously pays the contracted fee for those services.
Going back to what Joe was talking about, the ad valorem taxes, and I think you said it goes up 2.9%, Joe, here, from the 27 million to the 28 million, about $800,000. How does that work if the ratables are going up by 8.8%?
So in that graph,
at a proposed higher millage rate.
So in that, we're using, I'll get to a slide later, where we're using a baseline millage rate, the baseline that we need to fund operations. So it's not the number that's in the end of the presentation, but I'll address, if you can.
Hold on 1 second. But our budget is based on what we intend to raise for revenues versus what we're going to spend. And what I understand, 30% will say are going to be limited to the 3%, but everybody else is going to be the 8%, or cost of living in this case is probably high enough that they're going to pay the full tilt. So how can we only show 3% operating ad valorem taxes going up?
Because that's using a lower millage rate of 2.9, which we'll get into later, 2.9839. That's the millage rate to just fund the operations with no CIP projects, no new initiatives.
Fine. So let's say it was 3%, and let's say it was 3.15. It's basically the same. I'm talking about the 8.8% increase in the ratables, only which 30% is protected by homestead. How do you just get down to that number?
If we use the same millage rate, the difference in numbers would be exactly the 8.8. I'm using a lower millage rate to get to that number.
The answer to his question is not that this is measuring non-ad valorem revenue. This is under a category other revenues. That's not the answer.
No, he's talking about.
No, it's under here. It's under top line, Frank, ad valorem, okay? And basically, you have 27 and a quarter million. Now you got 20,063,000. 63. Okay, basically, I'm saying I don't understand. No matter whether you use 3.15 or 2.9, that's not 8% difference.
I use the 2.9. If I'd use the same millage rate, the 3.115 that we have now, the difference would be exactly the 8.8, the increase in valuation. I'm using a lower millage rate because that's what I need to balance the budget as a baseline number.
So, and you're talking about the operating budget.
Correct.
So, okay, the ad valorem tax are 2.27 million before, right? And that's based on pretty much accurate what's going to be, right, for 23. Mm-hmm. And then in 24, we're gonna go up 8.8%, except for homestead, which is only gonna go up 3. So you're saying reducing it from 3.15 to what number is 8%?
It would be 8.8% if I used the same 3.15
So you're gonna
millage that we have now.
reduce the 3.15 by 8%.
It's not 8%, it's
Well,
it's less
8.8
than that, yeah.
Excuse me?
It's not 8% decrease, because there's still, the number still goes up by 2.9%, so
I'll
it's
tell you
still.
what, I don't want to bore everybody with this.
We'll
Show
talk
me your
offline,
numbers
okay.
later. Okay. But you see where I'm coming from.
All right. Next slide is our reserves, projected and goals. We ended fiscal year '22 with 14.9 million in our general reserves, and we were able to replenish our emergency reserves back to 4 million, the historical value that they've been at. We're anticipating in a fiscal year '23 to add another $1 million to that general reserve, which will put us about $20 million overall. In terms of percentage of the operating budget, that put the general reserves at 40% and emergency reserves at 10%. If you add the two together, it's 50%. So what does that mean? We're able to fund this village for 6 months out of the year in case of a dire emergency if there's no other revenue coming in.
Excuse me, before you keep going, I want to ask you about the building special revenue fund.
Sure.
So you're now moving that out of the regular budget and taking the expenses and revenue and accounting for that individually. What is the $1.2 million to do in there for?
The $1.2 million is the balance that it's going to have at the end of the year.
Like a slush fund?
The revenues have exceeded the expenditures for the last 2 years, which is why that fund's been built back up.
But it's supposed to be basically a break-even type operation, isn't it?
It is, but you want to have enough surplus in there in case of dire times. Like I was here during the pandemic, that balance went down to negative 600,000. The building office department was closed and we were still paying operating expenditures.
Do we adjust the revenue accordingly, whether it goes up or down, on an annual basis, or just when it comes back before the council, and so we have to do something?
So by making it a transparent separate fund, I want to have that discussion every year to address the fees to make sure that it's appropriate. We're restricted by state law as to how much of a fund balance you can carry. When we get close to that maximum number, of course, we'll come here and talk about, does that fee need adjusting at that time? But now we can all see it clearly outside of the general fund, so we can talk about it.
And I think one of the things that we're actually why we're presenting these funds and also why we present the reserve on the next slide is we want to make sure that we are demonstrating all the funds under management, right? This isn't just about the budget. We want to make sure we can have these kind of conversations. And then I think you know where we're going, council member, but I think it's important that the council understands that we have an operating budget, but we also have other funds that we want to make sure that we're clear and understand the direction that they're moving.
Very clear. Good presentation. Thank you.
All right, back to the reserves and projections. And some of the reasons for holding those reserves is, as I mentioned, liquidity for economic downturn, emergencies. It helps us maintain our strong credit ratings. If you look at both Moody's and S&P, they want to see strong general fund balances. They have certain metrics where they want to see at least a third, 30% reserves in of your operating expenses in your general reserve. And also, we're able to take advantage of those higher interest rates right now by holding these reserves.
Yeah, just an FYI, something you explained to me, which is interesting. We set the emergency reserve at 4 million based on an ordinance that the village has passed over the years. It could arbitrarily be higher, but we have an ordinance that says at a minimum and a maximum.
Yeah, so the minimum I believe is 2 million, and the maximum is no more than 20%, no more than 20 or 25% of your operating expenditures.
Okay.
And I saw you asking that we make a practice of 10%. What do other municipalities do? Because I know when we've had storms and things, people have talked about that 4 million didn't necessarily feel like enough.
So I've looked at best practice guidance from the GFOA, I've looked at other municipalities, bond rating, et cetera. I feel comfortable because of our general reserves that even if the 4 million wasn't adequate, we could always tap into that general reserve number above it. So I'm comfortable where it is now. The manager and I came up with these percentage of operating. We like the 6 months of the 12. Not every municipality faces the same threats that we do. So we saw a lot that were lower, but I kind of tried to look at coastal communities like Miami Beach, where I previously worked, who faced some similar threats. And we feel comfortable with this as a recommendation for where we feel comfortable.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, I mean, you can comfortably say that our rainy day reserve is 20, even though the emergency.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we tried to do. And I mean, you could either put it in emergency, you could put it in general.
Right.
Obviously, we're very careful whether it's general. We're tied to it by ordinance on emergency. Obviously, if we get to a situation where we have to make decisions, we can adjust that. But really, our goal, and as you see, what we recommend is something we want to do is make an administrative policy that we stay at 50%. And I just think that's good business.
Can you relay some of the issues that our friends over on the West Coast are going through in terms of having reserves to be able to hold on?
Let me answer that since I was the one who talked to the city manager. And I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor. And when we went over and talked to the city manager in Sanibel, Dana Souza, interestingly enough, here we were talking about all the things that happened to Sanibel, and obviously, from a physical perspective, it was horrendous, right? Probably the second thing he mentioned to us is the most important thing we need to do was a revenue replacement plan, because when he entered into the post-hurricane and began to do his operations, he had no money. He actually had to let people go. FEMA comes, FEMA helps, but FEMA works on a reimbursable basis. So you have to have an ability to fund up front. And so there's two ways to do that, maybe more than two ways. But primary ways is obviously having that reserve for when that happens, and also maintaining a credit rating so that you are an entity that someone wants to invest in as you go forward. Loans are available. People will fund you. But FEMA, again, will only reimburse you afterwards. In fact, I think you all know 2017 we had Irma. We're still getting reimbursements from Irma. So it takes a while. So never thought of that. One of those lessons learned. Obviously we're a barrier island as well. And so we want to make sure we're in the position that if anything happens like that, we have those funds and we also have that credit rating.
Well, and in addition to that, if you have decreasing property values because your homes are completely wiped out, that means that your next year's budget's also going to be in trouble because you're going to be completely, those are going to go into the value adjustment board and say, hey, this thing isn't worth $1 million or $500,000 or whatever.
Exactly. Yep. So, and part of that evaluation is not just the property itself, but it's also the government's ability and the individual's ability to improve that property. So much goes in that evaluation. So if you're able to turn around and begin to do that investment process, the quicker and faster you can do that, the more likely you can at least maintain a portion of that value, maybe not the full value.
Okay, so now we'll jump to the expenditure side, and here we tried to categorize not by department, which we'll get to later, but the cost drivers of what's moving our baseline operating budget. So 60% of our budget is the personnel. This is salaries, benefits, the total cost of our people who are probably our most important asset. Then we move to professional and contractual services, which take up about 16%, and then all other operational items, operations, maintenance, and repair items, which take up 19%. Overall, the total operations increase about 7% when we go from 23 to 24. Shouldn't be as a surprise. We're bringing a lot of contracts that we've put out to bid to the council, these resolutions for votes, and you guys see the increased costs that we're seeing in the market when we go out to get these fresh bids. We're getting the competition, but we're also feeling the impacts of inflation in the market when we get those bids back. So we're trying our best to get the best value, but yes, costs have risen, and we're feeling the impact just like everybody else is. Below the line, debt service, there's a big savings there as we matured one of the 20-year debts from one of the Civic Center buildings. That's the biggest decrease here. We paid about $2 million in debt service, and now we're down to just $1.3 million of our proposed $40 million in debt service. So a significant decrease there. And lastly, transfers out. The only transfer out that's in this portion of the budget, the $260, is the 1% of ad valorem to the land trust. There's no transfers out in this money for CIP projects. We'll get to that discussion later of which CIP projects do we want to include in this budget. That would then drive that number up and increase the millage accordingly. So this is just baseline budget, just the 1% that's required by ordinance, but no new initiatives, no capital projects. This is the minimum number to keep the lights on and people paid come our New Year's Day, which is October 1st. So next is the pie chart of our baseline budget estimate showing.
Excuse me, Ben, before you go forward, you mentioned about the credit rating, you mentioned about, Steve, about the emergency reserves, et cetera, et cetera. Are we considering standby letters of credit? In other words, one thing is to keep money that you're not using or not utilizing. Now you're at least, you're getting a half decent return for it, but under normal circumstances, you get a fairly poor return versus getting a standby letter of credit from the bank so that when we do have emergencies, we have something to draw on. I mean, we investigated that. We should look
Considered,
into
yeah.
that.
I mean, right now, it doesn't make sense, but every year, of course, we're looking at as
Well, I mean,
markets
like, you have
change.
all these reserve balances, and some of them, why keep reserve balances if you don't need them, if you have a standby letter of credit? Why raise money, take the money from the taxpayer, assuming you got better use for it than he does, if in fact we have a standby letter of credit, so in case we do need the money temporarily, till FEMA or everybody else reimburses you, there's another source of funds.
No, obviously a consideration, yeah.
I mean, you guys understand where I'm coming from, and I think just take a look at it when you have a chance.
And that also, we could go into more, but also make sure that you have the debt coverage as well.
Sorry?
You also have to make sure you have the debt coverage. And so
We have the,
we could have that.
well, the point is, when we have the ability to tax, we have the ability to cover debt. Anybody will lend us money when you have that capacity.
To a certain level, yes.
Yeah, no doubt, but also not too aggressively. We don't hold anything in reserves and only have a letter of credit. We do have
I'm not saying
bond rating
eliminate the
agencies.
credits completely.
Okay.
I'm saying consider that and with reserves, so you don't keep excess reserves. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. The next slide has the pie chart showing the distribution amongst the different departments of the village. This is what maintains the same level of service, what I call it a baseline budget. So this is just our basic operations with no CIP projects. This includes personnel, our current operations, routine maintenance and repair. As I mentioned, no transfers to CIP program, and initial estimates for property, liability, health, workers' comp insurance. These get negotiated over the summer, so hopefully we can bring even the baseline costs down when we have our hearings in September. So this baseline budget costs just a shade under $38 million. The baseline millage, if you only wanted baseline services, would be 2.9839, which is less than our 3.15 now. That's the millage rate that was used in that ad valorem chart that you were asking about, of why it didn't look like a full 8.8 increase, is because there's a significant reduction in the millage rate, but as I mentioned, this doesn't fund any new initiatives. So that's where baseline is, and then I'll turn it back to Steve as we talk about some of those new initiatives and hopefully get guidance from council as to where we want to go.
Thank you, Benjamin. I appreciate you setting that up, and hopefully we've kind of put the budget in context from a strategic standpoint, but also where we stand in the current revenues and what we believe we can do. And I want to reiterate again, back to that baseline budget. That is what we can do at the same level of service. Obviously, costs are a little bit higher this year, not just a little bit, a lot higher this year than they were in the past years. That's what we can do to continue to give the same service that we've given to our residents this past year. Now, if we do choose to do additional initiatives, and this is where we begin the conversation, this is where the interactive part with council begins, and as we all know, we do want to move forward. You heard a number of folks come up in public comments. Obviously, there's only about 10 of them here, that they represent a portion of our residents, but there are many out there who are looking for more and additional services. If you walk down these bullet points, it kind of walks you through next what we're going to discuss, the next actions they're going to achieve our strategic goals. If we choose to do them, they would cause an increase in expenditures, which then would have a associated millage impact. These new initiatives, most of them would cause an increase to the baseline millage. Some are already some are already covered by the transportation fund. Some are covered by the stormwater fund, and they're called out in the spreadsheet as we get to them. If you could push the next button, if you would. Most important bullet up there is that bullet right there that we highlighted in green. This is where we begin to make decisions on how we balance what we want to execute next year. How aggressive do we want to be? What do we need to do to support our residents' needs and interests? And then where do we want to keep the millage cap? So this is where we create that balance and have that discussion. As we go forward, those that are highlighted in green were the ones that we identified. And again, I want to make sure you understand this is where we identified from the administration, clearly hearing the council's guidance, the residents' interest, as well as identifying inside the administration what we see as the priorities. Again, that's open for discussion tonight, the whole intent of this evening. Those in green we see as the number one priorities. Those that are highlighted in yellow are the number two priorities. We were able to recommend to fund all the number two priorities, but not the $1.2 million for St. Agnes, because that would have put us a much higher millage rate. So what I like to do, and if you'd like to go forward on this, we can bring up each one of the directors to talk about these items if you want to get more clarity on them. But I want to walk you through so you understand what this slide exactly shows you. So if you go to the top, you see that this identifies the goal, which is a safe and secure village. If you go from left to right, we've identified the priority of each one of the actions, the focus area, the objectives, the action itself, the cost of that action, and then the impact on millage. So that when you look at how much it costs, not only do you know the number, you'll also be able to calculate yourself to see, as we make a decision, yes or no, how that adjusts our millage rate. So I'd like to start the conversation. As you can see, the majority of the greens and yellows are on this first slide for both fire and police. And if you'd like to come up, Jason, where are you? He's available to discuss those first items for the police department.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Jason Eunice, Deputy Chief of Police. Our focus remains on enhanced police presence, engagement, and the effectiveness of our police force. Our number one objective is to prevent crime and disorder. To support this objective, we propose starting phase 3 of the cameras and security systems installation at our remaining parks and beach access pathways. We want to address the increase in youth disorder and citizen safety concerns. We want to ensure beach safety and rule compliance. We want to enhance our school resource and village resource officers program. Lastly, we need to replace 5 vehicles from our aging fleet by purchasing 5 new police vehicles. Take any questions.
Can you elaborate a bit on the juvenile disorder and attendant safety concerns and what types of responses you anticipate deploying?
So we have had an increase, juvenile disorder and youth disorder related to gatherings at the CVS and other locations on the beach as well. That requires manpower and resources. We've been doing it with on-duty personnel. So we basically remove somebody from the road and stay within those areas to kind of control that. We're working with management through the our village resource officers as well to develop a program to have an officer there present. That's why we're asking for the overtime, because it's taken away from our resources in the streets and dealing with crime prevention. So we're becoming more reactive as more of these things are occurring. So we want to kind of curtail that to have that issue addressed and have our personnel dedicated to the streets and being more present in the community and in the neighborhoods.
And I'd like to add, and Chief Souza's not here tonight, but obviously Deputy Chief is. One of the things that Chief Souza did when he came in is he really looked at his overtime budget, and as I asked him to do, I asked him to tighten it up, make sure that you move it in the right direction. I think he moved it a little bit too much, too low. And as we found out over this last year, there's a big interest in our community to make sure we have safe and secure beaches, parks, roads, and maybe we shifted that a little bit too low. So what this is asking to move it a little bit back up, $100,000 to provide that police presence that I think our residents are looking for.
On the broader question of our say from 13 to 18-year-olds, I keep hearing that out there in the community that they are not fully well served in our recreation activities. Is that something that you all would concur with?
So our village resource officers are working on a program for that age group, specifically geared to mentorship programs and working with other community organizations such as the seniors and having kind of that combination of 2 different age groups and having that engagement related. I think that's going to be important to that both sides kind of see the perspectives that they're dealing with, and kind of alleviate some of those issues. But yes, we have seen.
And I think that's not for tonight's discussion, but it's something I think long-term we got to be thinking about, you know, what activities appeal to that group that we're not giving them, and therefore that's why they're out, you know, at CVS or Sir Pizza or out in the street, you know, and you see them, there's 30, 40 strong or something. I think that we need to look at that and find other solutions.
This may not be a complete answer or an answer at all, but it is an observation that there's ample programming, but the perception among some is that it's not cool to participate, and the resulting takeaway from that observation is that this may be about more marketing, promotion.
Yeah, and so part of this budget too in the overtime is training the officers that we have in those programs to make it, to how you stated, cool, but more importantly engaged, and they're understanding what the needs are of these youth, and hopefully bringing them in and being able to work with them in an effective way.
Go ahead.
I wasn't going to comment on this, but I can't help myself. I think also to put in that matrix some educational things for parents. I don't know how you could possibly make any supervised program cooler than hanging out unsupervised. And if you are allowed to roam the streets, that's always going to be the cooler option. So maybe if we switch it around a little bit, and remember we had those commercials, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? Like, anyway, that wasn't my actual question. I just couldn't help myself. My actual question was if you could talk just a little bit about some of the ways you're thinking of. I heard you mention enhancing the school resource. And my observation is that those programs run really, really well already. If there's additional funding needed for that, what are you guys thinking?
We're thinking of doing more things on the weekends. And so those resource officers are usually working school hours. So we don't have that opportunity. We want to bring them in on the weekends and also have them do events and do more events because they have been successful. Part of that is education, and we do host parental education campaigns where we're talking to them about safety with the golf carts, safety with their scooters, the e-bikes, things of that nature, or trends that are happening in the community. Just last week, we met with the state attorney's office and their community affairs group, and they're wanting to also invest in the community and come out to these events and kind of explain what are the consequences of some of the things that could occur if a child does certain issues in schools and even outside. So that's where that investment is going to be placed into.
Thank you.
I don't know if some of you have gotten emails, but I have on this action item, beach safety and rules compliance, that people are taking their dogs on the beach and not cleaning up after themselves, or you're not supposed to take your dog on the beach anyway, but is that what this refers to?
It is. We do our beach patrols days and nights. Obviously, we can't dedicate an officer there full time. Some of that would be to dedicate officers there on certain days, full time, a day and night officer. So it enhances the opportunity for us to remain in the village. And I say us, I mean the patrol officers that are out on the road, because that's who we're using now, is officers that we have on the road to deal with those details as well. And it takes time from some crime prevention things and initiatives that we want to do out in the neighborhoods.
Do you think it's possible that council could receive, before we have budget hearings, a manning chart showing how the police department works and how you employ people at different shifts, where they go, what they're supposed to do, and what they cover, so that we can look at it and say, hey, this is reasonable, or you know what, maybe you need more people, or maybe you have too many people, or whatever. So we can make a decision financially whether we should be spending more money or less money?
At the last strategic session, I think that was a point that Councilwoman McCormick brought up, and it was to kind of do a pie chart or an illustration as to how much time is being spent on these details, how much time they're spending on calls for service, how many calls they're spending on traffic enforcement, all the things related to patrol out in the neighborhoods. We were able to create and get a caption of that. What we did was 3 weeks of monitoring. We did the average of what the patrol officers were doing, and we were able to get those figures.
But that's not what I guess.
I'm sorry.
I didn't make myself clear. I'm sorry, Jason. What I was saying is, okay, you have the night shift, and you have 8 guys or whatever you have, and this is what you're doing. 3 guys are in patrol, 2 guys are doing this. What's the breakdown, what they're doing? This is during the day shift, this weekends, school. Obviously, the school is not open on weekends, so we can actually see how many people are working and what they're doing at all times, and then we can put numbers against it.
Sure, absolutely. What we won't do is disclose the number of officers we have on the road. That's just a safety issue, and I think that's, but we do pull the averages of that. And to that point is, we don't dedicate an officer just to the neighborhood. We don't dedicate an officer just to the beach. They do multiple things. They're doing, and capture that.
I wonder how many, I'm not saying what they're doing. You got 7 guys on the street at this shift, you got 5 guys at this shift, you have 1 person in school, you have 2 in Marine, whatever. All I'm saying is what the breakdown is, the number of people on a regular basis, on a weekly or monthly basis, that's all.
Absolutely, we can do that.
And I think if you could provide that with the other thing you were just talking about, so that Ed's asking, it sounds to me like the plan, and if we could also see the actual.
The actual, okay.
And I think, Deputy Chief, as you and I, the chief, are talking about, is they capture quite a bit of statistics. And if you recall back, I think it was in February when Chief Souza presented, what we did over the last year. They've actually made them even more detailed. And what we're trying to do is place them by location, by time, by day. And so we have a better understanding the cycle and when we can anticipate where we need folks. So that's something we can definitely provide, and we can even provide it with the statistics that drive it.
Thank you.
In action item that it's called install camera and security systems at parks and beach access pathways. I get this complaint a lot also about those beach access points not being closed at night. Can we do that?
Which ones are you specifically?
The like the sands and
the new ones.
The answer is yes, we can. Obviously, a lot of these sites we are doing because it's required, as it's a public beach and required by the Corps of Engineers to be in their program. And we actually did reach out to the Corps. And if you have a policy in place where your parks, or in this case our beach, shut down at dusk and open at dawn, then you can in fact put a fence, put a door there, and you can lock it during those times. We intend to do that when we take over the Commodore Club South. Right now, it'll be kind of hard on the sands because of the way in which we built it. The wall is only about 4 foot high. Even I could still jump over it. And so I'm not sure that's really wasn't built with that in mind, but I think the next time we build them and we go the next step at Commodore Club South and Casa del Mar.
Don't try it. Okay.
I can do it.
No, you can't.
I think we'll do it there because now that we found out from the Corps we can, and that provides them yet another option for security.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
So next up is Chief Lang to talk about some of the things we want to do to enhance the fire and rescue services we provide to the village.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager.
Hold on, Eric. We had presentation malfunction.
Sorry. My fat fingers, I won't touch them. I think most of you probably know that Key Biscayne Fire Rescue has been in existence for 30 years. August is when we had 32 people came on board, and an expression, a slogan, if you will, that we've kind of developed is we're about changing outcomes of the emergencies and adding value inside and outside the organization. And I ask our members to do that every single day. On May 9th, you heard a presentation from CPSM, which was the Center for Public Safety Management. They came in here to do a staffing assessment. And in the 9 lines that a number of them are reflected in green, 5 or 6 of them came from this recommendation. And I've been working with Steve for a couple years now, and I think what this did was validate to the manager, to the chief of staff, to the CFO, that this is important, and it's important to sustain the fire department. And if you look at what we're asking for here, it's about people, it's about training, and it's about equipment. And these are really the necessities. To get to the point, there's going to be 6 new fire officers. And when I say new, these are newly promoted positions, newly promoted people to existing positions. And I heard, presented something the other day that talked about the hierarchy of competency. And you've had leaders in place for a long time, and they have a very high level of competency. And I think it just happens, and I think it's expected. But that doesn't happen by accident. It happens by experience, and it happens by training. And the only way to raise the level of competency is to expose our leaders to training and ultimately experience. But that takes time. And so we've got to fast track that. And that's one of the items that you see here. Part of our brain drain, if you will, in addition to losing 5 people this year and 3 people next year, our deputy chief, along with our all 3 chiefs, myself included, as we've discussed, my deputy chief is leaving in May, the chief of operations, and we're asking to double slot that position, where we bring in a deputy chief early to create an overlap, and there's an allocation of $40,000 for that. In addition, we're in the process to select 6 brand new firefighters. They're expected to start a recruit program in August. And just to get ahead of you, 3 of them are senior personnel from other departments, and they are being considered to be hired. And so you'll be hearing a little bit more of that in the future. You know that I've asked you to express a letter of intent. We had sent a letter of intent to Braun, which is a company that we expect to purchase 2 rescue trucks from, and that's here in the budget, $1.2 million. And also out of the CPSM report is the emergency management coordinator. And most people might say, what the hell do we need an emergency management coordinator for? And so we spent a lot of time preparing emergency management. We spent a little bit of our time responding, but we got to get it right when we respond. Similar, just the same way that our firefighters and police officers and quite frankly our entire village staff does, but specifically for maybe a wire that falls down in the middle of the road. How do we mitigate that when it shuts our major thoroughfare traffic down? Maybe it's a hurricane. Maybe it's some other things that we've come across. And finally, it's not just the fire department, it's not just the police department that's prepared to respond, but it's the entire village. And we have 19 people that we've identified as part of an incident management team that we are committed, I think, as a village to making sure that they're trained and exercising their training in a similar way that we would prepare responders. Because the reality is everybody that's on that team is expected to be a responder, whether you're in public works, parks and recreation, building and zoning. A team comes together to respond and manage this emergency, and that essentially makes up what is allocated towards the fire department. And I do want to recognize the hard work that I know the village staff have put into this, and I want to thank them for making it a priority because it's something we've been talking about all this stuff for a long time.
You have the answers to my questions for the 2 emergency vehicles that you want to get.
The 15 questions, sir?
Sorry?
The 15 questions
The
I have right
15
here.
questions, yeah.
I'm going to go through them?
No, just give me a copy of them. I want to bore everybody with them.
I can do that.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So before we go to the next slide, I just want to make sure that you understand the way in which this presentation is built. We're going to go through each one of the goals at the end. As you saw, the one in gray, probably about 5 or 6 slides in, we actually have the roll-up of the recommendation. I think that's an opportunity where we can talk the big picture. And again, I want to make sure the ones that we're recommending, that you understand, those are the ones that are in either green or yellow as we go forward for funding. So next up, our Building and Zoning Director, Jeremy.
What does BLDG mean?
That is the building fund.
Yeah, so good evening, Jeremy Karras-Gauger, Building Zoning Planning Director. So we have 3 actions here, 2 of which are funded by the Special Revenue Fund, which is the building fund, which is funded through permit fees. And those also cover anything having to do with the flood insurance program. So we have the major initiative, and something you'll hear as a running theme through everything I'm working on, is focusing on insurance. So we are still in the process of working on our CRS rating and getting it from 8 to hopefully a 6. We are basically going through the audit process right now. And we have some funds here to hold over and keep our current consultant who helped us do the work to date, to keep them on board so they can look at our next steps. So we know that wouldn't be an immediate preparation for an audit, but it would be a general assessment of what we can do based on the scoring criteria in the system and what kind of actions we could do if we wanted to lower it further in the future. So that's that 25,000. And the other one is actually more of a fund. For the other 25,000 is more of a fund for in case we want to retain somebody or do a study overall insurance markets. Like, we are very much in the early stages of learning about this. It's become such a critical factor as rates have gone up so much. So that's really more of a reserve in case we do a study. And then finally, the last one is 25,000 to improve Acela for code compliance. So much like we rolled out our electronic plans review for the building department, we have a chance to automate a lot of our work for code compliance cases. Everything from better documentation in the field from our officers to that sort of getting fed into a pipeline, and the cases getting prepared for special magistrate much more quickly. Of course, always with the hope of never actually having to bring those cases to the special magistrate, which we have a very good rate on, of actually just solving these things before they get there. But in the event that they do, a lot of the paperwork can be better prepared. So that is our initiatives.
Frank.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, this 25,000 for if we do decide to do a study, the maybe, what's the timeline on that? Like, is that really something that we would end up, if we're at this point now undecided, how realistic is it that we will choose to do it and execute it and need that full amount of money in the next fiscal year?
I think the chances are actually pretty high. We're already doing outreach to professionals. I'd say probably the biggest challenge right now is everyone I'm speaking to is trying to sell something to somebody. So they're not in a role where you would fund them independently for a general analysis. And that's just because that's the way that market works. So we're still very much in fact-finding mode, but that's happening pretty quickly this month, next month, following month. So I think it's actually a pretty high chance that we would be able to get to that next step and bring in an independent expert over the next fiscal year.
Okay, and with how quickly things have changed, or how do you feel in terms of like competency of these experts, right? Like,
So look, the market-driven people, that it is their job to stay on top of this. We're considering. Last year we did sort of a forum on building recertification work, really focused on the condos, and we had local officials participating, And we've even considered doing something similar with some of these experts, but they are all, you know, professionals working for companies. So it's a little bit of a different sort of dynamic. But I think, you know, they're on top of this and they're following these items. And I've been attending some seminars, online seminars for the changes in the market. And it certainly hasn't settled out yet, but these are people that are very much on top of the implications of what's been happening in the state and the market.
So you feel good.
Yeah.
And then my last question, maybe is a question for Benjamin. The Acela code compliance, why would that not come out of the building fund?
So I can answer that too. So a portion of what our code compliance staff does is related to building code enforcement, but only a portion, right? So if they're issuing a citation that's related to a construction site, if they're issuing citations related to non-compliance for recertifications, for instance, or work without a permit, that absolutely is. But anything related to zoning, anything related to our local ordinances regarding
Trash cans on the street.
Trash cans on the street, noise violations, violations for, it's a common one for the landscape work, blowing things into the street or using a gas-powered blower. None of that can be covered by the building
So
fund.
are we splitting this between the two, or is it just straight millage?
We could.
Could we do that?
We should be able to share this fund. We should be able to share that with the building fund.
Let's do that.
And I think we do have sort of a general formula that we apply based on how they allocate hours.
I wish Ed
Yeah,
was here to
that's
hear
good.
me do that. Somebody tell him later, please.
I hope he's,
We'll make sure we will.
I hope he's paying attention.
Gold star for
Thank you.
Allison.
That's it for me.
Thank you.
I have a feeling it may be worth speaking with the Regional Planning Council on the insurance analysis. I think they've done more than a superficial dive and have a database and analysis.
Yeah, okay.
Check them out.
Yeah, I'll speak to them. I think recently new director, I believe. So.
Well, not yet, but soon.
Okay.
Soon.
Yeah, we'll reach out.
Okay, I'll do the same. I'll try to find out.
And it's that unique combination of those who are creating the regulations, understand the regulations, and those who are actually feeling it on the market side. And I think we're all trying to feel that from the what was passed in December at the state level and what the implications are from both sides, regulatory as well as market.
There was a resident who's in this industry who's senior, who had volunteered at least a luncheon conversation. We should take advantage of that.
We definitely do. We've met with two, and I think we are long overdue to get back with those two individuals. And if there's more that we can talk to, we definitely want to. And then the more we can do, free of cost, that's obviously the best. But I think at some point in time, we owe the residents the best information that we can get in a professional manner that provides them the details that will help them make the right decisions.
And this seems probable and featuring into our legislative goals for the next legislative session as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, next.
So next up is Todd for Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. As Benjamin stated, things are returning to normal at the community center. There was an earlier comment about the lights at St. Agnes, and just so you know, those are scheduled to be replaced with the field lights in August. And you talked about the teens a little bit. The youth council had their first event, unfortunately rained out. But every indication was that it was going to be a tremendous success. It was marketed 100% by them on social media, 0% by the village. And we stayed behind the scenes. And I think that's going to be our recipe for success going forward, is letting them lead the charge, us be support, and help them plan. And as soon as we're involved, it pretty much ends the potential of reaching that age group. But I think for the first time in a while, we have something in place that's gonna really engage that population and, change how they interact with the village, so.
It was just a social gathering?
It was so cool. It was a battle of DJs.
Yeah, and it was just one of those torrential rainfalls we had right before school let out, and unfortunately, we weren't able to proceed with the event. But they put a lot of work into it. I know Brett's not here to speak to it, so I'll kind of take that for him. But I think we really do have something in place with them that will lead to some successful engagement with that age group.
They actually put a lot of work into it. They did it very quickly, and they were forecasting close to 230 people that they were getting responses from that would actually have shown up that evening.
And just by the amount of cars driving by with that age group, like asking, or is it a go or not? It was going to be a great event. Yeah.
Going back to the initiatives that the police was talking about, it might be a good idea for them to also engage. The audacity that adults can set up programming for teens is kind of silly. It might. So there could be some good level of engagement there between the two groups.
Sure. And with that, I'm ready to discuss the items before you. If you have any questions. Obviously, the art board spoke to you earlier, so you see that funding is included in the budget.
Just to remind all of us, really, I think it was the last council meeting, the observation was that the state of play with the Badia plazas has become rather dire. Latest art board meeting also pointed out some troubles with Sarah Morris, so there's some real needs now.
And we have some gym drain issues that we've reached out to Gym Drain, and we're trying to figure out a way. The issue is that the way it was designed, water collects in the light fixtures on the artwork, and we get it eventually arcs and blows out the light. So we're working with him on ways that we could potentially alter his artwork to allow the water to drain off instead of pool on the lighting fixtures.
This may not be the ideal time to talking about land acquisition earlier and ideas to be more achievable in our aspirations. Is it a good time to at least report how we're feeling about Virginia Key and what the prospects are for a result there? Or is that premature?
I don't think it's premature. It is where it is. You know, there are 120 acres there that are still a landfill. The county is going through the design for capping. Unfortunately, that started back in 2017, is not done yet. Hopefully soon. I'm not sure we have a date. But when it does, the design does get complete, and I'll let Jeremy take this from there. There is a process from putting out for bid, finish the capping, and then design of the actual park going forward. If you can give me more detail.
Just actually might have some update just from last night attending the Virginia Key Advisory Board meeting. The big hang up on the landscape on the landfill design was actually tree mitigation, because it was going to be a number in the millions, and they've resolved that with a redesign. So they're actually moving forward back on track. The news from last night, which is actually probably more promising, is the area formerly known as a homeless encampment, which is actually of a good size. It's a good sized parcel. It's about 5 acres, if memory serves. And that they might be looking at that as an area for playing fields.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Not optimal because of the location, but it will certainly help.
And it's sort of downhill a bit from the plant, and you know, obviously anything we can do with mitigation, with landscape and that sort of thing to screen it it's possible. There's some space there.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about the artificial turf proposition for St. Agnes?
Sure. I think we find ourselves in a very similar place than we did with the Village Green. We resodded last summer that didn't make it through the athletic season, not even very far into the athletic season. So investing in annual sodding, I don't think is fiscally responsible. I think, now we've had experience of 10 years at Mast, 7 years on the Village Green of how artificial turf works for us, how it benefits us both financially and operationally. If you recall, after all those rains, you could still play on the Village Green because the drainage and that was built. That's obviously not the case at St. Agnes. And it's not only our users, but the school users that are unpleased with the condition of the field and would like for us to make an improvement. So.
How much does it cost to resod it each year?
We did a partial resod, which was probably 40% of the surface area at $50,000. Right now, we got a quote to do a full, which we should be done, which is kill off, laser grade, start again. That's $120,000.
And how long does the artificial turf last?
We've had Mast for 10 years.
And how long is our lease with St. Agnes?
10 years.
10 years?
We just renewed it this year.
Is it 10 years or 5 years?
10.
Do they have the right to get rid of us in 5 years?
They have, yes, they have.
Okay. What would happen if they get rid of us in 5 years? And we put down $1.2 million worth of artificial turf?
But I think if we were to do something like that, I think the terms of the contract would have to change. I mean, if we're going to make a $1.2 million investment there, I think that
They
would.
would agree, you think then to basically prorate the thing for the years that they got rid of us?
Well, I think that would have to be part of.
I mean,
yeah, I think we would
to
have
make
to
this
think about
reasonable.
what that contract is if we were to
Fine,
make
okay.
that kind of investment.
But I mean, that would be something I think we should definitely, if we're going to do this, make that part of the thing.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to do it, it would obviously be over the summer, so there would be time to amend an agreement, bring it back to you, have you approve it. Of course, you would be approving any agreement for the artificial turf in that time, and then we would want to schedule that project to start in June.
Is the $1.2 million a estimate from people bidding on it, or just basically we're figuring so many square feet and this is what it's going to cost?
No, it's talking with people that have constructed our fields in the past, but having learned from the Village Green.
Yeah.
They're going to give you a price, but that won't account for the inflation potentially between now and in a year, basically. Their price doesn't include bond, permit fees, engineering plans, construction
It does or
drawings.
does not include?
Yeah,
It does include?
Does not.
Does not include.
So-
So what do you think that would add to it?
No, the number you see is.
We've added, the
all-in
1.2
number.
is all inclusive.
So it does include it?
Yes, I'm saying the estimate provided. If you were to ask at our first turf club, you're not going to get the 1.2. You're going to get about
I understand.
850. But
Okay, so you've gotten prices already and added to it.
we've done market research.
Yes. I mean, more than one bidder?
Yes.
But
And this is true, right? The quality of the turf is substantially improved over Mast.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, we did a different infill on the Village Green. With the sports we play here, we'd probably look for another product. Still, we're an outlier on the Village Greens infill because it's still about 85% to 95% crumb rubber, but there are new technologies. There's cork, there's other organic materials. But of course, again, our climate and rain.
Yeah.
Play into what would be the best choice for us to make.
What about Mast? What's the projection for replacing that field?
We just did a major project that ended today. If you go look at that field today, it looks nothing like it did during the school year. That was something we wanted to do during the school year, but the school just didn't have time for us to get out there. So, we wanted to make that improvement. We were talking about doing that field, proposing that field, but then St. Agnes became a more urgent issue for us. So we have a lot of needs. St. Agnes jumped Mast, but Mast is still a need. as you'll see in the out years of the CIP. But I think at this point, operationally and agreement-wise, and then our end users would most benefit from St. Agnes being completed first.
You think we got 5 years left at Mast?
I think that might, 2, 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super bummed to see this change. I understand what you're saying, but I was very much looking forward to us getting moving on Mast. Could you talk just a little bit about what you did there?
Sure. We ended up, I think, I can't tell you how many hundreds of pounds of the crumb rubber was removed. So it's gone, because what happened is that field was at an elevation of this, and over time it's half the elevation it once was, just from wear. So that left all the crumb rubber exposed. We patched, there was some holes that needed to be fixed. We patched those. The penalty kick areas were replaced. And when you saw the penalty kick area replaced, they put new turf and had to shave it down.
To make it match?
Yeah, or else it was going to stick up that much higher than.
And so they removed all that crumb rubber that's been
Not
all over
all of it.
the kids, but everything that was
Exposed,
up and
yes.
all over the school and all over the children?
That's gone.
Okay.
And I sent that to Dr. Gould and Mrs. Coleman today. Mrs. Coleman responded, thank you for.
Todd, we didn't play rugby at Mast, at St. Agnes. How long would the thing last? Would we still pay the same amount of money each year?
No, rugby's a high-impact sport.
Suppose we didn't play rugby there and we played rugby over here in the field instead.
They would not want to play on that field because it's a much harder field.
Oh, but we're going to replace this with turf, so they don't want to play here either then.
No, we would replace this with a turf that they would want to play on.
So we're not going to do it with artificial turf?
No, you can do an artificial turf that would meet the rugby's expectations. The Village Green is a harder, faster surface that plays well for soccer, but it's not designed for rugby.
So my question is, suppose we didn't play rugby there, and we just had turf the way we're doing it now. How often would we have to replace it?
It would be difficult for me to answer that question because there's a contributing factor that I don't have data on. When they decreased that field size by about 35%, which I think is a reason, a contributing factor for the field degrading so quickly. But I can't separate the two, rugby versus the shrink in the field size, because what it did is it concentrated all the PE use and all our use into a much smaller space where everybody's now using the same center area. So would it be less? Absolutely. Can I quantify that for you? No.
I'm trying to find out how much does it cost the village to provide a field for people to play rugby versus, all the other sports type thing. Since obviously it's much more maintenance, much more repair. And then the other thing is, suppose we didn't have rugby, but we played there and the church uses it for their school also, right? But if we weren't there, wouldn't they have to maintain it also?
Yeah, but
obviously.
They would.
So the question is, how long can anybody talk about negotiating, say, hey, listen, you're 10%, 20% if we weren't there, so they would contribute something for this.
I mean, if you recall, we weren't there for a period of time until 2004 when we renegotiated to build the fields and install the lights. The field was fine for them.
I'm sorry?
The field was fine for their needs. Without us involved, without us maintaining it and them doing very basic maintenance.
So you're saying they never have to do anything?
Of course, you would have to do maintenance. You have to cut the grass. You have to fertilize. You have to treat.
That all costs money, and I'm just trying to say, for negotiating, or discussing, trying to be fair. I'm sure they want to be fair. We've been fair with them.
I know.
Maybe they can contribute something towards the cost of the artificial turf.
And we will. Obviously, when we go to the table, we'll take everything into consideration.
So maybe they'll reduce the cost of $1.2 million. A few $100,000. I don't. Just thinking of some way of minimizing or reducing the outlay for the village.
I understand.
Talking about rugby, and I'm not suggesting we do away with rugby, but if it's possible to sort of to look at that, and if the feeling is that rugby itself is really taking such a toll, maybe we could redo Mast for rugby and not put artificial turf at St. Agnes? Since we already have to redo that field. And rugby could play at Mast.
We'd have to.
Can you stick that in the hopper and
Sure.
think about it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Or in the Crandon Park Oval.
Or the meadow.
That'd be nice. I think Allison is bringing up rugby because she observes that sailing is far less oppressive on turf than rugby.
Fair enough.
It is true.
Fair
Except for the wheels of my car pulling a trailer when I go over my neighbor's yard.
Quick for me, I remember from the strategic session that we had the discussion about Harbor Park and its fuller use, and also the goal of perhaps establishing a similar relationship with the community church. These are listed as lowest of low priorities. Can you remind us of the thinking behind that prioritization?
Well, again, the first, when you look at the community church, there's so many factors involved in that, right? I mean, first, it's their will to actually do it, right? And I think when Todd and I were over there, I see that they are still wavering as to whether that's something they want to do. So I think that would require more conversation. Secondly, if we were to do that, it would have an impact on the farmers market. And I think that's also, I think that's a very big favorite of the community. So that's a big decision that we'd have to consider as well. And so I'm not sure they're ready to make that decision. I'm not sure we're ready to make that decision, but I also want to make sure we keep it on the table so that we have an opportunity to continue that conversation. I think, and you can probably say it better than I think we had 2-3 meetings with them, and I think they were gung-ho the first one. I think by the third one, there was a good sense of hesitancy. So I don't think we are really ready to move forward on that.
I understand. They weren't part of our discussions internally, but one of the observations that I remember is that the farmers market, which is great, could go somewhere else and still be their deal, but it could go somewhere else.
I think that could be amazing if we put the farmers market here, but still let them run it as their fundraiser in exchange for use over there. I think they could.
We did talk about that. Obviously, it comes down to a traffic issue. It becomes to an insurance issue, and then those are also some of the things that led them to a little bit of hesitancy as well. Is I no longer have this on my property, my extension, my ability to manage it. So when we started throwing a lot of variables in it, it's just kind of. This is a complex situation, right? We don't want to take away. Yeah, first of all, it's their field. Second one, we don't want to take away something that's very beloved by the village, which is the farmers market.
And Christmas tree sales.
And Christmas tree sales. They could still sell Christmas trees on the parking lot, but
they can't do coffee.
Yeah, another issue.
I didn't write the ordinance.
And then, we can talk later about Harbor Park, but I've started to notice there's a lot of spontaneous use over there. There's lacrosse, there's soccer. People are using it.
And I think another priority for us is obviously the U5 playground, under 5, the younger kids area. That's needs some work, and where we do have a FERDAP grant, $117,000 grant for that project. So that's something that you would, if you could, you would want to fund, because you're receiving more from grant funding than you are budgeting for the work, and it's work that needs to get done.
And I just want to make it clear, it is funded.
Yeah,
and
so
anything you say FY23 CIP, it is funded in the CIP, and that money will be transferred over to 24 when that FERDAP becomes available. Todd's getting excited about putting his playgrounds in.
Going back to the Vice Mayor's comment, isn't adapting Harbor, especially Harbor, isn't that like low-hanging fruit at 50,000?
I think so. And I think we have a holistic approach that the manager has charged my department with, that we're working on, which is going back through all of our sites, drafting what's the amenities, and also looking at our policies. the beach parks become a little bit of the wild, wild west, come to approach you with, do we want to have party rentals there? Do we want people to be able to train there? If so, what do we charge? How do we structure that? Do the same with Harbor Park, and then codify all that so it can be enforced by us and the police department. And so we're looking at the operations of all of our parks and what we will be doing and coming back to you with that.
Todd, with the software that you use at the community center, do we have any kind of availability to do like online booking for things like that so that people could see, you know, the availability of, say, the beach park? We already own that?
I'll have to double check, but if not, I know we used a service during the pandemic that worked out. It was very inexpensive and worked out very well for us, where everybody could book lanes when they were swimming. And we operated with that for a while, and that we could easily, once we decide the regulations for park rentals, when you want to do it, like if maybe it's one, you know, at the beach park, it's only Saturday between this hour and this hour.
Yeah.
But I think we'll have a healthy discussion about that, and then put that all together. And of course, we're going to want to address Harbor Park when we do that.
You want to talk? You want to broach those? You want to broach those items?
Yeah. You have hire a contractor to manage athletic program, $200,000. Who manages it now?
So, if you recall, we did have I did bring my slide with me from our playing field workshop.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So this is our telling you what the community's come to us requesting. We had the playing field workshop, the sports and playing field workshop. And the community said, we need more people. And as you see, the chart depicts how many people are in the program. And then if you recall, since the inception of the village running the program in 2008, we had 2 staff people in 2020, that was reduced to 1.5. So we have decreased staffing, increased participation. So we talked about whether it would be hire or contracting. We thought contracting, we could try to see how it worked out. It's not a long-term commitment. See if it has a benefit for the program and its management and the end users. And then after doing that for a year, come back and make a recommendation.
How many people are in the soccer program?
1,000.
1,000.
So basically, that's managed already outside, correct? Marcelo.
Yes. Well,
Marcelo's deal.
They manage a portion. Yes, they manage the day-to-day operation. We do the scheduling of games, the scheduling of our fields. We have a referee assigner that we both work with. It's still a significant amount of staff time. It's not turnkey.
We're not subcontracting the whole thing out to them?
We still control the access to our fields, the schedule if we have to, because we have other programs.
Okay. Besides scheduling, what are we doing for them?
For soccer,
Yeah.
all the player passes.
The what?
Player passes. You need a player pass to play. And then the players change teams. We're always making new player passes as they move from team to team. It's labor intensive. And I tell you,
Ed doesn't understand what the labor pass is.
So if you go to a game, every player has to have a pass that shows that they're on that team.
Okay.
And part of the program.
So you don't put ringers in.
Yeah, so people aren't trading people, moving people around.
Okay.
So we're making all those passes, and then people are always changing from team to team, so you got to reissue a pass. There's a lot of logistics that
Do we
goes.
get any revenue from that?
That's something
system?
that the manager and I are working on and are planning to include in the, if you recall, we're going out to bid. So we are looking to include that in the bid language, that a portion of their revenues comes back to the village.
Are we on track with that?
So we're basically looking for a
Preparation of the other.
contractor
Wait, one at a time, guys.
for the other people other than soccer.
What's that?
So you're basically gonna be looking for an
No.
outside contractor for the 1,000 people in the other programs other than soccer.
And they'll be involved in some of the contract enforcement and management for who's ever running our soccer program to make sure that they're,
Well, then if we're gonna have a contractor do that, well, why don't we run the whole thing ourselves or a whole thing?
we don't have the manpower to run that.
Sorry?
To run the whole soccer program?
Well, no, you're contracting out soccer, which is half of it. Now you want to contract out the management, right, for the other half, so to speak.
That person would help manage soccer and the other programs, yes.
All right.
Again, this came from your
Todd,
constituents.
what happens with the staff you currently have doing this?
So it's 1.5 staff members. What we've found is between a lack of volunteerism, that even our part-time staff that we have ends up coaching. So then they're not available on the operations and side of things. So then it's left to those two people. And if you've ever been around when flag football's ending and basketball's beginning, they're slammed. They're going 24/7 because they're trying to end one program, start another. Nobody has the long-range view. They're just trying to get by day. This position would be like looking, okay, 6 months out, baseball starting. This is what we have in place. This is what we need. Those two are just slugging away, trying to roll the big ball uphill and keep those programs going.
So you think there's enough work for that 1.5 and an outside contractor at 200,000?
Yes, and the manager and I took this approach because we'd like to analyze it for a year and then report back to you that, yes, it's
Before you commit to benefits and.
Exactly.
And one of the things, actually one of the most dynamic and exciting meetings that we happened to attend, the community meetings, was actually held here back in February. And I think we had approximately 50 people in here because it was about sports. And obviously that is a big deal for our residents. And that was one of the big things that they brought up is how do we manage this entire program instead of just doing the sport by sport by sport. And I think we're missing out on maybe the optimization of our fields, the way in which we use our equipment, our time. As Todd mentioned, instead of looking 2 weeks down the road, we're looking 6, maybe even 12, maybe even 2 years down the road. And so actually that was something they brought up to us. We kind of were hesitant at first, but I think with further conversations afterwards, I do see a lack of his staffing and the ability to actually run the program. And when you look at, we have 3,800 kids between 1 and 18 in this village, and I think this is a very high priority.
Todd, do you see this lightening the load or helping in some way with the VAP?
Yes.
Do you currently see that board doing sort of administrative work that really is not appropriate for a volunteer board that's supposed to report to council?
They have been.
I don't mean that as an accusation.
No,
I mean they're all well-intended and filling in where there's gaps.
Yes.
Yeah, and so they've taken on roles because there's an opportunity, not an opportunity, but a need.
Where there's a void, they're filling it.
Yeah, and they're filling it.
And have you experienced, like, in us trying to figure out how to justify, it's a lot of money, right?
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what's happening. Do you see, in response to volunteers taking on roles that otherwise would be filled by paid staff and paid employees, have you experienced sort of negative fallout as a result, like within, like sort of community tensions or things falling through the cracks in ways that are negatively affecting the program?
Yes, they're great programs and we love them, but could we do a better job? Should we be doing a better job? Absolutely. And, like you said, you earlier talking about getting the kids involved, the better our programs that they are, the more kids we have involved in them, and it's a better outcome for everybody.
Thank you.
I think, yes, I think it would be beneficial, based on the questions as well, to understand the full scope of what this person is going to be responsible for doing, inclusive of reducing the scope of the VAB, which we all, arguably we realize has taken on way more scope than what they was originally designed. For example, maintenance, forecasting, and procurement of equipment for the different sports. We talked about a little bit today and how some of that equipment should last 5 or 6 years, but because it's not being managed well, it's not being forecasted well, it's not being maintained well, it's not lasting, so money's kind of going out that way. How are we upkeeping on the fields? What are the SOPs behind that? Are they going to create SOPs that allow us to manage those fields better? I'd like to see a full scope of work, almost a job responsibility of what this person is going to be doing. Not only what they're going to be doing, but what they're going to be alleviating for your staff, and then what that staff is going to do otherwise. And I think that those were kind of some of the questions that Allison asked and Councilmember London asked as well.
We'll be happy to provide
So if we can have that, I think it would be much easier for Hess to have a clear picture on what the value of this position truly is.
Sure.
Yeah.
And basically, part of what you're saying is the people you have doing this are really field people and not management.
They're filling the role, the most immediate need. They're plugging the hole that needs to get
Yeah.
plugged, and that's on
They're
that
scrambling.
side. Yeah, they are scrambling. I mean, the full-time person is a camp counselor this summer and every summer, and that's how we maximize it. He's not, because we need that person, he's not planning the fall season right now. He's working camp. So we need somebody who right now is focusing on all the fall seasons to kick off.
Is this maybe a good time for a plug? Do you have open positions for camp counselors that you would like people to apply for?
We do have a vacancy in our community programs person. Carlos became
Oh, that's right.
moved on to the Marlins full time. So if anybody's interested, we're interested in finding somebody.
And that listing they could find on the village website, I'm guessing.
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So next up, we'll talk about our transportation requirements, and do I see her here? Where did Colleen go? Oh, there she is, coming in from outside.
Good evening, Council. We're on Accessible Connected and Mobile Transportation Network. Obviously, traffic, congestion, mobility are huge for the village. We have one way in, one way out, so Crandon is a major focus next year. And particularly what we have highlighted here is $750,000 for the harbor area between Fernwood and Crandon. I think we all know that that's a very confusing, congested area that causes a lot of conflicts between the plaza weirdos and that traffic circle. So what we're proposing is to completely redesign the traffic circle, redo the crosswalks, redo the pavers, replace the curbs that are broken, and then we'd also thin a portion of the median on the harbor area to extend the turn bay for people taking a left going north on Crandon, because right now the queue length is too long and it backs up into that traffic circle, and that's where you get people not being able to turn onto Fernwood, and it all just locks up. So that's the main priority.
Is that just a ballpark estimate?
Yeah, that's based off of, so we have an engineer in-house that works with engineering firm, done a study before, but between our public works director and the engineer and the in-house assistants, we have a pretty good estimate for what the design and construction would be.
Does the St. Agnes pick up and drop off, has that changed, and does that complicate this condition? If so?
I'm not sure if I know if it has changed.
I think the easy answer is more people are coming there,
Mhm.
but I do believe their loop around the back has provided much more queue space for them, so they're not out on the road. So I think the answer is probably not. It's just a tough intersection, you know, and there's a lot of people going down that road both ways in the morning. They're going west and they're coming east. We are working this, we're about ready to kick off. We've finally gotten through the permitting or the reverse permitting process to get the signalization up and running on Crandon Boulevard, which will help alleviate some of the movement on the traffic on the boulevard, which may open up more space movement on that section of the road we're talking about. But again, that we'll see that when that happens. But that is, as we all know, the only way to turn right to get to the backside of the island is to come all the way down to McIntyre if you miss Harbor, and people aren't coming down to McIntyre. They're going right on Harbor.
I think, Frank, just my experience, I know when we approved the site plan for St. Agnes, their rerouting was certainly going to help traffic. I mean, it was one of the reasons that I voted to approve it. But currently, I think with all the construction vehicles and even just construction workers, we're not seeing it yet the way that we will. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, they do have a lot of queue space back there, but I think as the council members mentioned, it's still quite a
It's a lot of
busier.
volume.
And it's never going to solve it all, but they are taking vehicles off the road.
Oh, and instead of doing this, could you consider, say, at Heather Drive and Harbor Drive, making it one way, say from 7 in the morning till 9 in the morning? So at that point in time, anybody from Heather would go either out of McIntyre, Westwood, Mashta, rather than coming down and going on Harbor.
Which road do you want to make
In other words,
one way?
I'm picking a street like Heather,
Okay,
and so take Heather
yeah.
and then make that one way. So anybody coming on on Harbor who would be south would have to go out through one of the other Enid.
You want to redistribute the
McIntyre,
volume that's being funneled
takes
into
the volume
Harbor
off.
and move it.
Take the volume off of whatchamacallit. Do that in the morning?
I mean, there's no reason to say that we can't look into that. We have the
try it.
ability to
I would
model
say
it.
the only thing is in the morning, Enid and McIntyre are a
Right.
complete and
Already
total
busy.
disaster.
Yeah.
But you can also go.
You could go to
West. You can
Westwood,
also go
for
west.
sure.
There's luckily a lot of redundancies on the east-west movement in the village. It's the north-south that we have trouble with. So at the end of the day, you're still funneling the same volume of cars onto Crandon, and the signal timings that you're dealing with are not timed for that new volume. So we would have to look at a rerouting study and figure out how many are going at peak hours.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
The difference is they wouldn't be queuing up in one line, blocking the intersection.
Yeah, they wouldn't block,
and
maybe
the
they wouldn't
circle.
block Fernwood. They potentially won't. The other piece is that is an area where a lot of trucks stop and drop off, and then they have to do that turn around the circle as well. They make it by running up that ramp, but what we want to do with that circle is the reason why it's deteriorated so much is because the trucks do end up using every possible inch and more to make that turn, and it's really putting a strain on our pavers and the turning radius, but that also might alleviate some of the issues.
I think also getting rid of the bus on Harbor will help us a lot with that, because the buses
They stop.
also just go straight right over
They do.
the circle.
I've seen it. Yeah.
On this issue, I definitely think that we need to do it. I'm not sure that until we see how that right-hand lane works and how the traffic's gonna flow at St. Agnes. And then the other difficult thing is convincing the owners of Harbor Plaza about working with us with that, because that thing doesn't work. Every time I'm sitting there, I'm watching, and people want to take the right turn on the first entrance instead of the second one where they're supposed to go.
It's logical to do the first
Well,
one.
and it also sometimes just jams itself up. It simply can't move
It's
because
true.
the entire thing is stuck.
Yeah, I'll just say this is a quagmire. And as far as the Harbor and Crandon intersection improvements go, the right turn bay is gonna alleviate congestion or queue length on Crandon.
Yeah.
So the same amount of cars are gonna be turning onto Harbor. It's just those turning cars aren't going to be stopping the through cars from making their through movement.
What's the update on that, by the way? On that right turn lane?
We will start construction after 4th of July. I wanted to hold it off until, I did not want construction to be going on during the parade.
Yeah, okay.
That's kind of like a dig once.
Are we?
Oh, boy.
Until you hit a duck bank and remnants from the next door neighbor.
To Chad, do we have any way of working with like that shopping center to ask them to change their flow and stuff? Is that we don't really have any authority to do that, right, in private property?
Correct. It's on private property. I mean, general rule is you can't expend public funds on private property, but if we can demonstrate that there's a public purpose to doing it, but I'm not sure, what the solution is there. It's a complicated traffic flow. So,
Ed, you've done these kind of things before. You got any suggestions?
I'd like to look at the various ways of temporarily directing traffic morning and night, rush hour, so to speak, whether it be temporary one ways. You see that other places, and where it doesn't cost anything to try.
But I'm talking about the property of the 7-Eleven
Oh, yeah,
is.
I mean, that is, gotta talk to Mike Rice and see what you can do.
Unfortunately, he just redid.
Sorry?
He, not that long ago, redid the whole parking lot and repainted everything. That would have been the good time.
Well, it's actually, you don't need to repaint the parking lot in the plaza, is that what you're talking about?
Well, if you change the direction of flow.
You wouldn't, though. You'd do back-in parking. You'd do back-in diagonal.
Oh.
Yeah, so you don't need to restripe it. It's actually safer to do back-in parking anyways.
But ideally, I was told that the angle parking would be much better.
It fits more cars because of how narrow that
And
width is.
also makes backing up easier if you.
Yeah, so it's a one-way, right? So you go one way in, you see your parking space, and then you just reverse into your parking space.
But the
So the
reversing,
angled parking on the angled side is already fine for back-end parking. And then
Think
as
so.
you come around after the Golden Hog and go past the donut gallery, they wouldn't have to restripe because they're straight.
They're parallel, yeah.
Right.
Or not parallel, they're perpendicular. Yeah.
just an
It's
observation.
a simple arrow different, like change the arrow. So,
Until you get farther down towards St. Agnes, there's not a lot of congestion on Fernwood. But the back-end parking at the green takes time.
it does, but you're also dealing with oncoming traffic and traffic kind of go around you because they have the space to go around you with an oncoming lane. I can't predict the future, but I would assume that if somebody's doing back-in parking and you're seeing them do that, you're not going to try to go around them because you're going to end up hopping a curb and running into landscape, and that won't happen. So you actually might have more safety in this situation.
Mayor, just to follow up on the question, I was thinking, to the extent maybe we could get an easement right or something to that extent, that might be something that would help facilitate us to expend public funds there also.
What were the public funds for? Just
I'm not sure what we would
Yeah,
pay
he
for.
just needs a new sign.
You're asking them to just reverse the direction.
Oh, well,
If
before
you're
we,
just gonna ask them to do something, that's not, but if you're gonna expend funds on there, that's something else.
I'll be happy to call him, see if he consider it.
yeah, before we make a traffic engineering decision here, let us have someone take a
We
look
have
at it.
had this suggested
Yeah.
by traffic engineers a couple of times.
The thing is,
From
obviously,
BCC.
I want to make sure that we got Weirdos right before it, which is kind of a non-standard parking lot where people are coming out. That's a very, very dangerous location. So, there's, in some ways, them turning in to the right further down is safer for the Weirdos situation, but then it creates that weird infinite loop of them looping back on
Well, and
themselves.
it also tempts people to make the illegal left out when they exit the 7-Eleven shopping center because you can just barely
'Cause you can.
get by the median, and that's super dangerous.
Exactly.
But if they were over a little bit further, I think there's no way people would do that, and that would help with flow.
All of this would be studied in next year because this is so complicated and we're dealing with private property. But if we're going to modify a median, we can try to alleviate any kind of issue like that.
Yeah,
So
we could actually
look
bring
into
that
it.
median back a little bit, and so that they can only
Yeah.
go into the area. They couldn't even think about coming out and turning
Exactly.
left, as you're saying.
Yeah, trucks are actually going over that median at that right corner section, and
Yeah.
that median is pretty destroyed.
Yeah.
And I understand why. I mean, it's otherwise they
don't have an
can't get
option.
in there.
There's a lot going on in that one little strip of road there.
Are you studying Winn-Dixie as well?
I am not studying Winn-Dixie, but that's not to say someone else on the staff isn't studying
And
Winn-Dixie.
what part are you referring to, guys?
Similar, it's a better condition, but it's just such a popular destination. There's queuing from time to time back up onto Crandon to get in to go to the parking lot to go to the Winn-Dixie. It's just a victim of its own success. There's a lot of people going there, so it's busy. It's tight.
We are looking at the crosswalks. We have not looked at the how much traffic is going in. If it's backing up, we'll take a look at that as well. Because those crosswalks as well coming across are unprotected at this time.
I think the Milanesa Sir Pizza CVS shopping center bears a look too. It's also busy.
Yep. And what I would help a little bit, and I've talked to the manager about it, and I've talked to the Winn-Dixie manager. You notice that that's the only place where we don't have a golf cart entrance?
Yeah. Yeah.
That couldn't hurt.
It would help.
Yeah.
For sure.
What's that?
To have the golf carts accessible from the back.
For Winn-Dixie?
Yeah.
Well, they come off of Westwood, in the back of the place.
Yeah, they could easily do it with the bank drive-through that is defunct.
At Artisan.
What?
At Artisan.
Just turn that into golf cart entrance.
Yeah, they come in. They can't come in by the AT&T facility.
They come in the back.
But yeah, they could. They're also. We've looked at possibly cutting through.
The butterfly
Further
garden?
up, yeah. Well, it's actually where there's a propane tank, so we would have to move that. But I know Jeremy's been talking to Winn-Dixie on that.
Well, maybe they could just come in through the bank, since they don't have a drive-through anymore. We're changing directions all over the place. Oh.
Right. You can't just assume it's going to be vacant.
Okay. I'm surprised the improved traffic circles, roadways, sidewalks, didn't do better. Because that's a complaint I get all the time too, is that you guys don't maintain the circles.
I mean, it's definitely a need. It's not a 4 or 5 priority. All these are 1, 2, and 3. It's hard decisions to make with the prioritization, but we're here to hear your opinion on that, and these aren't fixed.
My 2 cents for what it's worth is that this is part of a, synergy of improvement for Harbor Drive generally. And to eliminate this element would be to have an incomplete assessment. So I think this is just a natural byproduct of what you're going to be doing anyway, is a higher priority.
Could we do one before the other, or this order is the one that is needed?
Sorry, you mean if we want to do the last or the number 3 instead of the Harbor Drive, Crandon, Fernwood?
Right.
That's a policy decision.
Yeah, but we. Look, I think.
But I mean, there's no engineering reason.
No,
not
it's
to
really.
do it.
We see and we've heard that the priority is reducing traffic, and so we believe that the first one is more focused on impacting traffic.
Yeah.
While the other ones is better roadway movement and obviously looking better. We'd like to do them both, but again, we had to separate them in order to fit into a reasonable budget.
So is this priority 3, $600,000 traffic circles, roadways, and sidewalks? Is that the repaving of Harbor Drive that I thought we were going to do included in this, or is that?
This $600,000 is not going to go that very far, but it would be a select. We have a number of circles, as you all know, around the village that are not in very good shape. A number of pavers as well. They're coming up.
But is that no longer on the table? I thought this summer we were redoing. Am I wrong about that? Harbor resurfacing it, that it's so bad.
No, we're not. We've requested money from the County Transportation Improvement Plan, but have not received any approval on that.
So this element isn't redesign of the circles with the idea of improving flow. This is just improving the degraded condition of the circles as they are. I understand.
Yeah, more of a rehab.
So my comment 2 cents earlier, 5 minutes ago, or 30 seconds ago, was more about redesign.
And I don't think, once you get beyond, you start getting to the Presbyterian Church, it really isn't a traffic flow issue. It's more of a rehab and maintenance flow, right? I think, and aesthetics as well. What we're really seeing traffic backing up is from Fernwood onto Crandon and Crandon south to about McIntyre. That really is the traffic backup inside the village.
I would be curious to see, though, the impact of St. Agnes when the construction is done and the right turn lane that we're doing on Crandon.
Absolutely.
Because that will even affect the traffic congestion on that part of Harbor for the headed south on Harbor, right? If you're trickling cars in constantly as opposed to only when the light changes.
Yeah.
So I would be inclined to do a little wait and see on that one.
On the priority one.
On the 750, yeah. Because I think the conditions are going to change.
Well, in fact, they may actually worsen because we'll be moving more vehicles down there quicker.
They may, but that would impact the choices you make.
It would, definitely. If we see, and I think the number in the morning is about 25% of the vehicles are turning right, coming off of Crandon onto Harbor. We're going to be putting more vehicles into that area faster.
Yeah.
So it will have an impact on that circle.
A little history on the circles. The engineers that designed the circles, unfortunately, didn't check with our building official at the time, Gene Santiago, and concrete they used, you'll probably remember this, was something that we would not permit a doghouse to be built with. And as a result, when trucks and heavy vehicles, it was all having problems. So therefore, we're going to hire the same engineers to redo it again. But then we finally realized maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. So we turned that contract down. And at this point in time, it's never been redone. So I think the concrete there is 2,000 or 2,500 PSI. The minimum in the village is 5,000 PSI. So just repairing some of this stuff, if you don't go all the way down, replace the thing, you're just wasting money.
And that's part of the problem with the pavers as well.
Yeah.
Just,
I mean,
they look good when they were built, but maybe not the right choice for a long-term roadway.
Anyway, just keep that in mind when you go to do it. You just can't do it partially. You got to go all the way.
Right.
Okay.
There's no other questions on the transportation part. I'd like to bring up Roland to talk about our resilient and sustainable issues.
Good evening, Council. We've got a number of different action items planned out for FY24. Essentially, they all fall within one of the 5 different lines of effort of our Resilient Infrastructure and Adaptation Program. We do have a couple priority items that we'd like to push forward, one being the beach renourishment, this interim beach renourishment to address the shoreline recession action that we saw during, and as a result of Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole, we were successful in getting money from the state, which we will have to match. So we want to advance that. That's a top priority. We also want to move forward with the working in collaboration with the Army Corps of Engineers on the Back Bay feasibility study. We were also successful in being able to get into the FY24 work plan with the Army Corps, so that's something that we are intending on moving forward with and will require a match as well. Some of the other items that we've got going on are related to ongoing activities that pertain to dealing with stormwater and street flooding. As a second priority, we want to look at funding the immediate flood control and mitigation area D. That's our sort of Band-Aid action to give people a little bit of break from street flooding using our existing stormwater system and getting it to drain a little bit more effectively. We do plan on getting started with areas A, B, and C this summer, as it's been approved already, and this is to align for the fourth of 5 areas. And then also we'd like to program some money to begin the design of the second zone of the stormwater improvement program that we've got underway right now with AECOM. So we're not straying far afield from activities that are already ongoing or in line with lines of effort that are part of our resilient infrastructure and adaptation program.
Question, why should it cost us any money to septic to sewer connections?
That would be, again, it's a WASD requirement, water and sewer requirement. When they came in and did the laterals for the homes to connect, they did not do this area. It's the area in and around Palmwood, and there's a couple other areas. So we're going to go back to them to request for them to do that construction.
No, I missed it. So I understand there's only like 3, 4, 5.
5 houses, yes.
So why would 5 houses cost us any money since it's their responsibility to hook up?
No, what this is not the homeowner's responsibility. When water and sewer came in and created laterals that enabled folks to connect into the system, they never put them close enough to those homes. In other words, the laterals, yes. So they're not able to make that connection.
The homeowner still has to pay for the connection to the lateral.
But they can't get there.
The trunk line's going down the street.
Right.
Now it's just a question of tapping in and put a lateral across the street.
Correct. Okay. And it's on the other side of the street, and so therefore those homeowners cannot access
They can't
the sewer
tie in
line
yet.
There has to be a lateral that comes across the street that enables them to connect.
So why don't we get Wassa to do it since they didn't do it right?
We are.
But why is it a millage impact if?
Shouldn't be.
Okay.
Yeah, it should not be.
All right.
Just
Ed, I just saved 150 grand there. Right?
There you go, Joe.
All right.
Well, but it still was not.
You missed it before I got
Allison
something
saved some
now.
money too.
But I also do want to make it clear that none of these on here are we asking for additional money. So the ones that we are asking for are already funded, such as the.
Where was that going to come from, the 150?
It was not, because we weren't asking for the, as you can see, it's neither,
Millage,
but it's neither in yellow or green. So it was a lower priority than we recommended.
Just discussion items.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you all would like to fund it, you may, but I don't think that you.
Sorry, Joe, you didn't save anything.
Come on now.
But what is yellow? I don't have anything yellow or green on this.
Not on this one, no.
Not on this
Because where I wanted to go is, you can see there are 3 of them there that are already continuing funding from FY23.
Yep.
The beach,
Yeah.
the Corps of Engineers project, and the immediate flood control. That $305,000 is a matching portion of the HMGP grant that'll assist us in doing work over here in the Garden District, just over here to your back. The good news is most of the investment that we've done for the Resilient Infrastructure Plan was either done in 2023, some with our money, but majority of that from grants, state revolving fund, relationships with the Corps of Engineers. So where we're going forward in 24, we're fairly well positioned financially until we begin to start talking about construction. And that's when we start looking at the GOB bond and some other sources of funds.
I think, by the way, just one thing. How many millions of dollars did we get total grants last year?
I was just going to ask that same question.
I think it's 8.5. I think do we have it in here?
Approximately 8.5.
Well, when you talk about grants, I'm also adding in the appropriations as well.
Right.
Because
No, I'm talking about grants.
but appropriations do turn into grants because they do, because the way in which we get them is we have to file for a grant. But
And basically, has Colleen been pretty much responsible for that?
oh, she's done a
Well,
little
I
bit of
really
work.
think we should thank Colleen, because up until now, before her, we never got very much. So thank you so much.
So what did I tell you when we
Stand up.
hired her? we were gonna make money 10 times over.
Did I fight you higher? You said.
Yes, you did.
I was
Yes,
just
you
gonna
did.
say, aren't you glad you hired her?
Hire you, I did, but not her.
You did, Ed, and
I do
I would
remember
tell
your
you she'd
first
make her
words out of your
salary
mouth
10
when you
times
met
over.
her.
What?
You did, and I say she'd make
No,
her
excuse me,
salary
we
10
agreed
times
on-
over. But it's been 60 times over,
We
just
agreed
to let you know.
fully about that.
Roland, he makes himself pay for himself too. No, but I mean, the good news is, through the council's effort as well as through the administration's efforts, many of them, obviously Colleen is one of them who's done some fantastic work. We are well positioned next year for the Resilient Infrastructure Program.
I think that's great.
So my question is actually not related to this, sorry, Roland, but that Ed just brought up grants. And I know when we looked at the baseline budget, you did not include any grants. Does that mean that the appropriations that we're counting on weren't in there? If they come through eventually as grants?
They are, and when we get to the capital program, you will see where they're lined up.
But were they in that baseline or no?
No, they are on
Okay.
slide 27 where you see the capital program.
Okay. Yeah,
laid
no,
out.
I saw them there later. I just didn't know.
No,
I gotcha.
because they don't. They're not operating. They're not maintenance. They're almost.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha.
Almost all of the grants that we receive are capital, and so that's.
Okay.
Yes, and I can explain a little. The grant cycles work on a long-term basis, so we might apply for something in fiscal year 23 or 24, and we can plan for that in advance. We don't know exactly when we're going to get it, and for that reason, we kind of just move that reserve over to the next year. It's not anything you've committed from a millage standpoint. It's just assuming we'll get it in the next year. This is the funding that we need to hold, because most of them are reimbursement based. So we have to spend and then submit reimbursements. But if we don't have any money in that account, we can't spend. So it's kind of a revolving door. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Good to go.
All right.
Clear while you're ahead.
This is easy. Best showing ever.
Didn't he just look like at the end of
Again, we went on asking for the money.
Breakfast Club?
Mark.
Judd Nelson? Especially from behind.
I think this is and some of you all may have met him, some of you might not have met him, but it's an opportunity for you to meet our IT manager, Alex Gonzalez. Hopefully he will show himself in a few minutes or a few seconds. Here he comes. But he's working with Joe very closely on identifying both our software as well as our hardware requirements to ensure that we continue to improve what we do inside the village.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing? All right. So what we got to offer, propose is a $220,000 for our infrastructure improvement of our technology. We're looking to relocate our actual network room on the second floor to a different location to allow that, free up a space that could be used for conference room, offices. With this relocation, this room will require basically a restructuring of the room. An engineer will have to come in. We would need lifting of the flooring, like an elevated floor for anti-static. We would need solid walls with concrete, camera system, split unit AC, anything to actually secure this actual room for data. Along with that, I'm also looking to implement biometrics readers. This will help as a layer of security for all users, including networks administrators like ourselves. Anything that we touch, we will require a finger reader, and it has to, that way our passwords, if they're shared, nobody could get in without any identification. Another form I'm trying to implement is security control access on the network rooms. That includes key card access along with the camera system. If there's any breach, we actually have a way of retrieving video and also seeing the logs of key cards, anything that who enters in and out of those rooms. For the police department, that's one of the regulations that are required by CJIS, that we have to have a form of security in order to present that for audits as needed whenever they come on site. And then lastly,
But police already has that. So we're not talking about that.
Well, they have one layer of security. They have the key card. They do not have a camera system in place. So
Okay.
they tend to require 2 layers of security. And then the last will be the police department wants to go fully electronic when it comes to citations and collisions. Right now, they're still doing it, writing by hand citations, writing by hand the accident reports. I'm trying to implement software that's free from the state. It's called TRAX, and it's funded by the state. The only thing that we're required to provide them is the officers, in this case, will be citation printers. With the citation printers, a thermal printer, they actually will be able to do multiple citations at once if needed, and also it alleviates any citations being misplaced or any reports not getting to the state, accident reports, what I mean. In this case, it's all fully electronic from the moment that they actually process whatever it is they're doing at the spot. Within minutes, it'll be in the state.
There's one more item on this list, on this itemization list, which impacts the village, is the upgrade of the phone system as well. We have a phone system that is 6 years old. So we've been looking at we've priced out a complete system upgrade for the entire village, for all village phones, to be voice over IP and obviously to bring us closer to standards that are utilized throughout. So that is another line item in this breakdown.
Did you say 6 years old or 16?
6.
6 years.
Is that old?
Yeah.
Yeah, technically, if the lifespan of any technology is between 3 to 5 years, we're about the 6 year. I want to add to that as well that with the upgrade, it allows us to, when we go off remote site to the COOP or anything, or the EOC for emergency purposes, it's just basically relocate the phone, and the lines will continue working. Everything will be status quo.
I have a question about this relocating of the
The IT
network room.
Yes.
Is there something inefficient or substandard of the room we currently have, or is it just a desire to have that space for something else and obviously state of the art?
I'll let
in the
Jeremy
new
elaborate
space?
on that.
So this is actually something we initially looked into as a reorganization of the office and customer service for BZP. So as we move to electronic plans review, away from looking at drawings, we actually need to configure some spaces for reviewing drawings on screen. And some of the ideal spaces for that are what is currently our drawing storage room, where we're literally filing away the big paper drawings. And then opposite of that, in the same, more or less a mirror location, is what's currently the server room. And, you know, this also has some pretty substantial operational impact. So the fact that the server room, which throws off a lot of heat, is on the same air conditioning system as our office, does two things. It makes our office freezing, and it makes our office, and it makes the AC system run really inefficiently. So we'll do the numbers, and this should be getting paid primarily from the building fund. I think we'll get a return on investment in terms of savings on air conditioning and lighting and things too.
There's also an issue with the hardening of the room. The current room is not hardened, so there's potential damage that could occur to those that equipment that is in the room. So there would need to be hardening of the space, and currently it's not. So
What do you mean by
there's
hardening?
In terms of concrete hardening, making sure that the room could, I guess, substantiate a certain amount of damage without damaging the equipment inside of the room.
Damage from what?
Fire.
So
water.
basically what she's trying to say is the room right now is just complete drywall. It's breachable. It's breachable from any angle. So it would need to be fully secure, it has to be in a solid concrete room.
So Jeremy said something I found interesting. I'm coming back to it again. How much of this do we think can be paid for by the building fund? And why is it not listed here in millage impact column?
So I'm gonna have you answer that, because I think it has to do with the portion related to this. It's not impacting the millage. Is that correct?
Is that already not listed here?
It's not the full 220. It's I don't know, just that part of that project.
So it's $100,000. We put $100,000 as an estimate towards the first phase of the development of this room. And again, that is just to set up the space for the IT portion. It has nothing to do with what would be set up for the BZP piece of it. So again, we'd still have to spend that 100,000 in the space that we've identified to get that space into conditions that we would be able to move our equipment into. BZP would then take over that space and do their renovations.
So
and-
100 of the 220, is that what you're trying to tell us?
Yes.
So but 100 then is eligible to, or not eligible?
Not eligible.
Okay. So then how much is eligible, and can we change this millage impact number?
So, right, so first of all, I do want to point out that this is not highlighted. So this is not
I
impacting.
gotcha.
This is not impacting millage recommendations currently. And again, we're still at the very preliminary phase of identifying how much this is going to cost. We know that it would be, at least at this phase, at least 100,000, but we're not sure how much we could extract from that and what would be assignable to BZP.
So it's a maybe.
It's a maybe.
And the biometric stuff, how much of that, how much is that when you break it out? And does that, I'm assuming that the real driver there is that it helps us with some of the ransomware and things like that.
It's a former layer of second security to help for any breaching that we could have through cybers or internal as well.
20,000 is the number.
Okay.
You said first phase. How many phases are there? 100,000? The first phase. Is that 4 fingers, 5 fingers just put up?
Oh, no. So we're not sure yet. We're thinking at least 2.
So each phase be 100,000?
No, we don't really know, but
We have to first prep the room and then
Okay,
see
this is something
what
to
condition
think
the room is in.
it's very, very preliminary.
Okay.
Where would you put the new equipment, new equipment?
It's going to be located on the second floor. Right now, it's being used as a storage room for the maintenance. It's right behind the men's bathroom. You'll see it's a long hallway. It's got 3 exterior concrete walls, and then the other wall will be reinforced.
Got it.
So you already have 3 of 4 walls are already concrete.
Solid concrete, correct. So it's an actually great location for that type of setup.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's go to the next one. So next one, this is again as we continue to look at how we communicate across the village. Obviously, we're very good tactically. We get our message out, we get it out clearly, but I think we need to begin to look at how we communicate at a higher level, more strategically. And so the first line that you see is enhancing that communication as well as our engagement with the community. And that is, a portion of that is how do we do it internally, but it's also how do we perhaps bring in a professional to help us train our people as well as begin to institute a more sophisticated form of communication. And the second item you see there is, which would be part of that process, would be an upgrade to our website, which is a continual process. You deal with the website you bought, and you maintain it and improve it as you can over time.
How much of this communications is separate and apart from all that we're already talking about doing, like when we talk about the educational component of our resiliency plan, or do you see this?
This is part of it.
This is for that.
Well, it's not just for that, but it's to put it all together again.
Because you feel like we're insufficiently funding it through the other ways that we.
I do, and I think this will also bring it together into a conjoined message, right? Instead of us messaging in silos, this will obviously focus on the priorities, but also ensure that we're also bringing it together on the entire mission, what we're trying to do. So,
And are you thinking that as someone in-house or a consultant?
a portion of it's in-house, but again, this is also bringing in professional support. Obviously, this is not something we'd have in person all the time because that's 75,000 is not going to get there. A portion of it is it's materials, it's strategy, it's videos, it's how do we take our communication to the next level, more sophisticated, understanding our target audiences. How do we better get to them? What methods and how would we approach that? Using what platforms?
I think we've talked about this. It seems important to reinforce the notion that communications is reciprocal. It's a two-way street. It's outgoing, but it's also incoming.
I think this is one of the most important things we need to do. We're going to spend millions of dollars. We need to make sure that our residents know what we're doing.
Yep.
And what's coming.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that although I think we're doing an amazing job, it's still not quite enough. We still have people, coming very upset with suggestions and questions of things that we're already doing, and there's no reason for them to have experienced that level of upset ahead of time.
No, and I think and the mayor said it well. I think, we do a very good job of communicating on a routine basis on things that we do regularly. But as we begin to take on something much bigger than what we've taken on before, this becomes much more complex, right? So it's not as simple as, hey, we're going to have a couple events here, we're going to have a couple events here, this project is coming up. This is now major projects are coming up. We need to get the word out. How's it going to impact you on a regular day basis? And so I think we're going to need to up that little more sophistication in terms of what we do.
So we're talking really about an investment in rebuilding that level of trust that we talk about, that we've had eroded by people saying it should be with, not that it actually should be, but just from accusations and so forth. Okay.
Of trust. I like
Right?
that. Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I trust our government, and I think you're doing a great job, and I think we hold you accountable.
I trust
But-
you too.
Thank you.
I mean, I think
But the community needs to know it.
Yeah, I think we have. If we were to survey the population, I think we do have a level of trust. But I think where we really owe them, we need to communicate and find even better ways to communicate to make sure that we get the word out, that they're aware, they understand what's the impact, and also how they can help us too. And I think I'm not sure. Maybe the vice mayor mentioned it. It's reciprocal.
Yes.
And I think it's not just communication, but it's also engagement. Right. So how do we engage as a population and the government?
That's a big part.
Yep.
Okay.
So if we are to go to the next slide, and I was taking notes as we went through. Next slide. So this was the roll-up of the number one items and the number two priorities, what we recommend throughout the entire presentation. What I did hear you all say that you would maybe potentially want to discuss is, do we do MAST instead of St. Agnes? What would be the cost of MAST? And then what would we have to do to make sure that St. Agnes also meets a certain standard? I also heard someone mention, should we consider the contractor for the athletic position? Todd brought it up, and at least I saw a lot of nods. I want to make sure those nods were in the positive. Let's look at the park programming. Let's evaluate how we run them. Let's evaluate is there potential revenues and better control on how we use these parks. And then fourthly, do we want to reconsider the investment in our traffic circles, our roadways, and our sidewalks? Just hearing by what you were saying, those were the four ones that I think you were considering that might be added to or replacing some of the items that are currently on this list.
I have an additional question that I didn't ask before about the camera and security systems at parks and beach access pathways. It seems really expensive when you look at how the cost of this type of technology, at least for like a homeowner, is really affordable these days. Is there some piece that I'm missing because we're a government, like a records maintenance, or why is that so expensive?
First, we're outside, which means requires that we.
Well, but most security cameras people put on their house are outside.
We do. I was leading up and let Chief answer that question.
It's the technology, fiber optics, the boring, hardening against the elements, and the type of camera systems that are out there. So it's different than what's at a home.
Okay. And have we explored the thing that I did just bring up in terms of keeping public records and is there a requirement that we log what we're recording and that we maintain it for a certain amount of time?
We have retention. I don't have the exact time frame, but we do have retention of video cameras.
Okay.
And the footage.
We also have arrangements with providers. We have access to certain databases that personal homeowners don't have also.
Okay. But we're aware of how long, like, because this is now we're creating a new
You mean the
public
retention
record.
schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have existing cameras, that we've installed. So we've looked at that. I mean, we'll confirm it, but there's a published retention schedule.
Okay, thank you.
And not the same thing, but the body cams have a different.
Right, we have those for 90 days.
Okay, so on this page, for our next time we meet on this, we all would want to have digested and come up with, whatever numbers we want to come up with in terms of getting to X amount, whatever it is, whether you want to do the 2.7 or you want to do half of it or you want to do some version in between is how I interpret it.
So plus the 4 items that Steve mentioned, although there's a fifth on my sheet, which is not a decision, but I had a question mark about Harbor Park and adapting for playing field use.
And part of that was the park program. That's actually where I picked that up, the park programming, and also because then it led also into a fee analysis, and then because there may be a revenue side to that as well as a expense side.
Okay.
So that's where I captured that conversation.
Steve, Eric said he had the answers now to my 15 questions on the 2 ambulances. Did he give them to you?
I do not have them, no, but Eric does have
There
them.
he is. How much are the 2 trucks without the chassis?
Each chassis is about 135,000.
Each?
Yes.
And the cost to move the body from one to the other? Or does that include that?
The total is 570 per truck, about 1.2 million.
So about 1/3, so 270 instead of $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure what you're asking me, but I said, I'm not sure what you just said.
You said 135 each.
Right.
2 is
For the chassis.
270.
Correct.
Versus 1.2.
Well, plus this fee to move.
Yeah,
The
but that-
total was what, Eric?
So I think just to clarify, if you're
Well, you know what, just give me the numbers and we'll get better later.
okay, but I think what you're asking me is about a remount, and there is a discount for a remount, and the way we're building these proposed trucks, we'll be able to remount, and they'd be designed for a remount. And I'd be happy to go into a new truck versus a remount, and why we're getting these trucks. And we can do that offline. I can do that with each one if you like.
I'm sorry, but I have a problem.
Offline's good.
Okay.
So just to answer your question, yes, Mr. Mayor. So I want to make sure we've set this up before. Again, going back to slide 17, baseline budget 37.9 million, which would come out to a millage rate of 2.9839. What we've recommended here, obviously for your consideration, would add $2.7 million to it, the proposed budget. And if you go to slide 29, that would result in a proposed millage cap of 3.2796, which would equate to a 4% increase from last year. So that the conversation that leads to how do we balance what we want to execute to what we want to pay. And so I think that's what's on, I think this is what's on page 26 at this point. And the conversation that then leads to what we want to do, how much we want to pay.
So the 4% would be for people on homestead, and the people who aren't on homestead would be 12%?
That's a question for Benjamin.
Could you repeat that millage?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, it's up
Oh,
there.
yeah, she just shifted there.
Do I not have that here?
Yeah, you do.
Page 28. So for the ones without homestead, remember they're capped at 10%. Value growth plus the 4%, so it'd be 14.
Maybe capped to 10. But
Oh,
10 is
thank
kept on the assessment.
And then you add the 4%
When you add the
increase.
millage, it's 12%. So people who are not on homestead, 70% of the population would have their taxes increased by 12%, and 30% would have increased by 3%.
But it's not
No,
12,
not
it's
3%.
14.
It's 4.7%.
The 3% plus the
3% plus the 4%,
Correct.
7%.
Are you going to prepare a new sheet that includes these other projects that were identified?
We could do that. I'm looking at the numbers. Just in a quick estimate, because I think we'd have to do a little more research, that would, what we are proposing or considering would add about $1 million more. So now we're talking a 3.7, I gotta put my glasses, 3.78 million, somewhere around that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Benjamin, what is the value of $1 million in mills? Was it 0.1? Plus or minus 0.1065?
Yeah. Yeah, we're at 9.9 billion, so it's
Yeah, so we
pretty easy.
we
math.
would then, if you were to add that $1 million, we'd be looking at a millage of 3.38, somewhere around there.
Got it.
And again, millage cap, not millage setting.
But you really gotta look at, you're raising the taxes 10%, 12%, or 7%.
Sure.
There's no, millage is just a number.
Sure. And taking into account the assessed values or where they are?
One thing the manager mentioned is this is the millage cap. So I want to go back a year ago at this time, and every year I've been here, we've set a number. I think the first speaker tonight, Mayor Davey, spoke about this. We've always set it high. Every single year, we've come back in the September hearings, and that number's been lower. The last 2 years, that number's even been lower than the taxes we had the year before. So let's keep in mind what tonight is, and then what our history and our track record is in actually bringing back a lower number for the actual number. This is just the max number that goes on the trim bill.
This year, what do you project the surplus will be?
$1 million.
$1 million, okay. Which is basically about 3% of the. Oh, okay.
We've learned this lesson well. You can't really set millage until you know what you need to raise.
It's just a net result.
And we're not there yet.
You're right.
So next time we get together, we're going to have to set a number that's comfortably.
About 4% maybe.
The cap.
4 mils.
Yeah. Somewhere.
5 mils.
Yeah. Less. Well, you just estimated, taking into account these additional possibilities, 3.3, 3.4.
About 3.38, yeah. Again, we'd have to make it a little more closer, but that's just off the top of my head.
And the other event that will happen between now and then is on Friday, we'll get the actual preliminary taxable value from the property appraiser.
Yeah.
So that'll help us, hopefully we eke out a couple $100,000 in there as well, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's.
I've lost touch with one question. The easements leading out to the beach, around the beach club, is there any work that we have not done to prepare those for use? Not a gate, I got that discussion, but surfacing?
For the one at the Sands and the Beach Club?
Yeah.
No, that's a paver, very, very nice walkway. Our next one that we've asked for funding for next year, actually not, because that's actually going to move from 23 to 24. It's already in the capital plan, is the one at Commodore Club South. As you know, we're still going through that easement agreement with the Commodore Club South.
Okay.
Could somebody just, what is the telelifter? Is that the new phone system?
No, that it does actually sound like it. No, it's a you got me laughing here. It is the public works equipment that it can act as a forklift. It can act as kind of a cherry picker, It can work. It's kind of that modification type equipment. You've probably seen it parked
It's parked right over by the.
right out back here by the back of the. Unfortunately, we do. Yeah, the hydraulics have pretty much shot.
No way we can figure out
How many
how
hours
to
do we
get
have on that
money
one?
from somewhere else.
We're looking at funding that we might be able to find from this year's budget, but right now we haven't been able to get it to $160,000.
How many hours do we have on that machine?
I do not know.
I don't know the number of hours. I can tell you how it's been used historically. So it's heavily used in storm preparation before a storm, but then it's also used the rest of the year for moving bleachers around, for some debris here and there. We definitely need it during storm season, and then it gets less used throughout the rest of the year. But we also priced rental, and it's a much better deal to purchase. Yeah.
I think it would be, when you said annually,
Yeah,
about
it was
$90,000.
$90,000
And how
annually.
What's the life of one of these things?
What should be the life?
We should get a maintenance agreement with it when we
Because
get it.
equipment like that maintained well should last 20 years.
And the one we have is
5.
I don't know offhand,
Very little.
but it's not. Yeah.
Kind of leading to where you're going, council member. I think it might not be a bad idea to get Colleen up here to go through the capital program, just so they see. Again, realizing what you see in the general fund, some we're recommending funding, some we're not, and I think you can highlight those as you walk through.
Okay, all right.
Um,
I think we gotta actually go not
Slide
the
27.
backup. Is fiscal year 24 in the backup slides?
no, slide 27. Go backwards.
Yeah, it's earlier. There we go. Oop.
Oh,
There we go.
Should be able to save at least.
Okay, so I think just a point of clarification here, there's more projects on here than what you saw in the slide before, which was Steve's number 1 and number 2 list, the green and the yellow. Those add up, the CIP portion of those add up to about 2.492 million. As you can see here, the general fund is at about 6 million. So there's additional projects in here, not knowing what you would like to prioritize or how things would shake out for the next budget hearing or budget workshop. We wanted to include all of these. To speak a little bit to the loans that we're applying for and the grants that we're getting, the $330,000 that you see at the top line is the vulnerability assessment. You'll actually be seeing the grant agreement coming forward in July for your approval. We may end up using some of that funding in fiscal year 23, but in case it doesn't end up starting until the next fiscal year, it's just programmed in there. No change in terms of cost to you, it's just a matter of timing. Renourish the beach and dunes. The grant that we got with that is from the FDP Beach Management Funding Assistance Program. That was an effort led by Steve Rowland and myself to fast track our timing on the beach renourishment, given the impacts of Ian and Nicole from last year. So they're gonna pay for, I think, 45.3% of the renourishment, and we ended up getting a state appropriations grant in the amount of $450,000, and we cover the rest, which is about $562,000. So we're getting a pretty good deal on our renourishment, and that the design should start almost now, and then procurement and bidding would happen in the winter, and we'd have to have a window of implementation in before turtle season, in the dry season. So that timing's pretty tight. We mentioned the under 5 playground. There's a FERDAP that we're going after. So you see the grant column is filled in there. We did have an over 5 playground that we applied for a land and water conservation fund. It's a 50-50 share, $250,000 grant, $250,000 match. That would be additional. That didn't make it into the first round of cuts. But if we do get that grant, we'd have to have a conversation about what we do next, because that's already applied for. And you'll see the HMGP grant for Area D, which is the Garden District up here. And what else do we have? We have $450,000 for Area E, which is the Immediate Flood Control Mitigation Project. That came from state appropriations as well. Yeah, so we're chugging away at getting grants. Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, looking at this, the Okay, the first column is what's gonna roll over into next year?
Yes, and that's also, as we refine that going forward, as invoices come in, we get more solid estimates, you're gonna probably see a little bit more specific numbers. But all of that is already money that's been, taxed and programmed in prior years, so it doesn't affect the millage.
Right. And then the second column was kind of like everything, your wish list.
It's like new money, yep. It's new money from the general fund, and you'll see stormwater transportation. Those are also different funds from village.
And as you mentioned before, although the number at the bottom says 5.9 million, on the ones and twos that we recommended actually came up to be 2.5 million.
Yeah.
So that they're not all ones and twos. They're just, this is the program as
This is a
it could be fully
full
funded.
program. If you wanted to fund the full thing, then you would have a $6 million general fund contribution, but that's not where we're at right now.
What's the CWSRF?
That's the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund.
One more time?
Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund.
That's borrowing from them.
Yes.
So this assumes, of course, this is for ACOM, the second portion, 30 to 100.
It's not, it's to design the rest,
That's
period.
30 to 100, we have 30% design, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're assuming now that we're definitely not going to put it out for design build to make sure, find out what it would cost.
But actually, we're not assuming anymore. We've reached out to the state revolving fund, and they said that we have to do a design bid build because they have the authority to approve that design. And then we also asked water and sewer. If we're going to ask them to pay for the design and construction, they also have approval of that design as well.
Which still doesn't stop us from putting it out for design build right now, does it? And coming back with a price, then decide whether we go with design build or we do the conventional method.
Then we would not be able to get state revolving fund, nor would we be able to get water and sewer
But it might
funding.
be less expensive, might save more money. Just borrow somewhere else. I mean, it's something to consider, but just because you want to get.
No, you asked us to look into it, and we did ask those two agencies whether we could do a design build, which, we did. State revolving fund requires them to approve that. That's what are we running at, 2.2% for a state revolving fund? Much better than
I understand.
even the GOB itself. That's a tough decision to turn around and take on a 3% under a GOB. And then if we're going to do water and sewer, they require a full design approval before we move forward.
I'm just saying design build right now, from your 30% drawings, so you know what it's going to cost. And you might decide, you know what, it doesn't make sense, and we'll do it this way, like you're proposing here. But until you do that, you're not going to know, and you're going to tell people, we did the best thing with your money. And I don't think we can say that with a straight face if we don't go ahead and see what it would cost the other way.
Why don't we do this? What's when we do, and I think the date is August 16th, when we do that workshop, let's have that conversation there, because that's when you actually will see the 30% design.
Well, you say that we have the 30% design done right now, right?
We do for stormwater, yes.
That's what I'm talking about. So at least with the stormwater, so we could at least find out what that would be.
Let me ask you this. In theory, one of the items that you have here, kind of the wish list, is $1 million for stormwater infrastructure update design zone 2, right?
Yes.
Could we just, instead of going this route, can we do zone 2? In theory, could we do what Ed suggests on zone 2?
You could, and we were considering that. However, you still would have to do the 30% design. You can't get to a design build without doing design criteria package, which is approximately 30% design.
Okay. That's what we have now.
Okay.
So my question is, why do we have to wait till August? Why can't we see if there's a market where people are interested in bidding the thing?
Because there are multiple components to the project, one of which is complete, which is stormwater. The other component is water and sewer. The other component is electrical. The other component is telecom, all of which needs to come together into a single design, and they haven't come together in a single design yet.
Isn't the water and sewer just a replacement of defective equipment that's in the ground now?
It is, but you can't look at doing it all with very thin streets, very small space, In some cases, we may have to move the water and sewer pipes based on where we intend to put the stormwater. Without doing the total integrated design, you just don't know at this point.
Back to my question, it is feasible to start going in that direction if we wanted to.
For zone two?
For two.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that we want to end up at 10 o'clock at a reasonable hour. Can we go into a final?
We can. Is there any discussion or guidance on where we want to go back to slide 26 on those items? Obviously, we have one that's recommending 2.7 and a associated millage. Again, I've off the top of my head about additional 1 million more would put us at 3.7. If the guidance is go back and calculate that out, do the numbers, wait for the number to come in on July 1st and how that adjusts it, then what we can do is share that spreadsheet out and show how that impacts the millage.
Can you give us the numbers real quick on those 4 additional things?
So the way I read it is, the question was, can we instead do Mast Academy, which would take that 1.2 million that we had against St. Agnes, put it against Mast.
Okay, but the 1.2 St. Agnes or Mass is not in here.
No, but what I'm following on what Councilmember McCormick asked is, if we were to take the money from St. Agnes, which was the 1.2, put that on Mast instead, and then she asked what would the cost then be to, on a regular basis, sod St. Agnes. I think that's what you said.
Well, really, what I was asking was,
And shift Rugby to Mast.
if Rugby were to shift, would it have enough of an impact to make it worth doing the shift you just said of doing Mast and just resodding St. Agnes periodically? But my microphone's not on. I haven't heard yet. Like, Todd may turn around and say, it's not just Rugby, it's the fact that this field shrunk, and because he said that what he said was that he would look at it and let us know if it's even worth entertaining.
Let's have the conversation right now. I mean, I think you can have within 2 minutes. Can you do it?
Yeah,
I mean, we can't come to an answer, but I think if you can give them some more information.
I don't think it.
You don't think it's just Rugby?
Rugby's a smaller program on a smaller field. So then you'd be taking that smaller program, putting it on the largest field we have, which is 4 times the size of St. Agnes, and displacing our 2 largest programs, which are field hockey and soccer, from the times. I mean, the only wrinkle there would be, could they share the field? But that has never seemed to work for us. When you have 2 people trying to share a field, it always seems to go south. So you would not be maximizing our field space by doing so.
So your challenge is programmatic, not even the environmental of the field?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have felt differently had you not done the work you just finished at Mass. But if we have a couple of years of renewed life there, I don't feel like we need to address Mass right now.
And I think I would welcome you all to go out there. Todd sent me some pictures about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I intend to share them with you tomorrow. And so you'll see it's significantly better. I mean, have we solved the problem completely? No. I think we have extended the life of it. And if you want to see it in person, obviously you're welcome to go. But I'll share those pictures with you all tomorrow.
I think, though, Frank, it wasn't for me, it wasn't only the conditions of the mast field, but also trying to see if it was at all possible to not pave another spot.
So we're saying that's a scratch.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think we'd even have to ask the question whether that field would accommodate Rugby. again, there's certain turf that you can use for rugby,
Well, if we were,
certain you can't.
the idea was
Yeah.
if we were going to redo it anyway, we could redo it to
I
accommodate.
got you, yeah, no, that's.
Okay, what's number two?
Number two was, reassess the contracted athletic program manager. Again, that was a 200,000, cost estimate.
But again, I thought you guys are going to look at that over the next year period, is that it? As to whether or not that would be worthwhile?
No, what we prefer to do and recommend doing instead of bringing on a full-time employee would be to contract it out, to determine if there's value to doing this, but at the same time also bringing in someone, and it may be a firm that does this, right? And they provide maybe more than one person, but we have to put in the scope, and I think that's what Councilmember Sardinius asked. What is the scope of this person? I think
Okay, so
that's where we'd have to go next.
So spending money is needed, or you have to do enough work in order for us to get to a place where we could say, hey.
I mean, the work is to come up with scope to ask the question of what we need to do. I think we know that. I just think we need to put it on a piece of paper, and I think that's something that we would bounce off the athletic advisory board. I mean, we can obviously, any council member would like to be involved in that, we can do that. I think we could have a scope done in 45 days, and then if that's the choice we want to go, and it's funded as of October 1st, we could put that out for bid.
If we were to think about that, that's $200K.
Yes.
Okay. Number three.
Number three, what I captured was kind of a hybrid of what we have in there. It's doing the park programming, the fee analysis, and the primary focus on that would be how do we adapt Harbor Park to allow not just more athletic, but more organized athletics in ways in which it doesn't necessarily deteriorate the field or the park as it is right now.
It included Beach Park too, though.
And we could add Beach Park in there as well.
So with both of those, you're looking at also at the possibility of some increase in revenue.
Correct.
And we're looking at across the board. I mean, we're looking at the potential of revenue sharing with something like the soccer program, the field hockey program. Again, these folks use these fields with no charge. We actually done some research, and there's many other cities that do it and charge 15%. We're even just considering 10% right now to bring them into the program. We don't want to do a shock on the costs. We're also looking at the membership fees for the community center, which hasn't been increased since 2006. We're looking at things like as we rebuild a lot of our parks and bring on something like a brand new pavilion at Beach Park. Is there a time that it can be rented out? We get better control, but at the same time we get paid back. Part of the problem that we face right now is it's just come as is. But if we charge a certain amount for an hour or two, our guys know, they come down, they inspect, they have to clean up, there's more control.
I have to say, I like the idea of having some sort of signing up for the accountability of leaving it in a good condition when you're finished using it. I also like it for, people being able, if we could do it online, to look and see rather than you show up to have your child's birthday party and someone else is already there. That kind of thing, because we do have so many people now using all of our wonderful parks that it'd be nice to have a place to see. But I would just caution us to not go to lean too heavily into the revenue side of this. That we have these amazing parks for our residents to use and to enjoy, that it's not another opportunity to sort of tax them in a different way, like covering expenses, certainly, and maybe, whatever it takes to maintain it, but not
No, we were never looking this as to make a profit. It really is to operate. Same thing we're looking at for the field usage. We're not looking for them to, we're looking to help us maintain the field.
And
That's all
the
we're
other
asking for.
conversation that we've had up here for years, and Frank, you'll remember this, when we talk about charging for the programs for athletic field usage, to communicate to them that we expect their prices to stay, competitive with their peers, that we're not looking for this increase to get immediately passed through to our residents.
I also, you remember Frank or Allison, when we did Harbor Park, neighbors were a little bit upset about the idea, and we said we're going to use it for a pump station and for a passive park, if I remember correctly. It was not supposed to be used for any kind of activity. The neighbors were really upset about that we were. We said, no, that was going to be a passive park with a pump station.
No,
That's my recollection.
we actually went back and we did have that meeting in here with the community on athletics, and we went back and actually looked at it, and it was never said it was going to, never in the resolution was it passive.
Oh, this was resolution.
No, and actually in the community meetings that was held, it never was stated that would be passive, that there would be activities, but it would be controlled activity.
And there were different
memory fails me.
there were different council members that felt differently about it and felt strongly, and we discussed that. I mean, he wouldn't, I don't think, mind me using his name. Councilmember Laredo felt very strongly about it, and I remember him saying that we had voted that it wouldn't be used for any kind of programming. And I said, no, I specifically remember that we didn't, because I would have voted no, because I thought we need to keep that option open. And so we have looked, I know the staff has looked back, I've looked back, we never did. So we all remember what our opinion was, but there was no motion taken.
No, we're going to do it very kind of, I think we use the word time and age appropriate, right? I mean, there's got to be the right time, the right ages. You know, obviously we're not going to put 18-year-old kids playing fully competitive soccer out there at 9 o'clock at night.
And we currently, it's being used a lot for things, for kids' birthday parties, for it looks like impromptu, like soccer clinics, maybe not so impromptu because they're in a uniform, but it's happening already. And are we getting complaints from neighbors other than the fact that we're not, getting any revenue for it? Or
I mean, there are a few. I mean, when balls fly across the road, but I don't think, I saw Mariana shake her head yes, Todd shake her head no. Maybe because she's a resident, she knows more, but from the parks director has not received any.
I live around the corner and I never see, and the only problem I had was when the shrubs were getting really high and I thought we were going to have some monkey business happening behind them, but that we cut them and that was good.
No more monkey business.
Yeah, no more.
No more monkey business.
You have a house of teenagers if you can't tell.
What's the dollar amount on number 3?
Actually, let me go back, put my bifocals. Actually, as I hear you now, actually there may be 2 parts to that. One is the Creative Park Usage and Programming Guide, which is $25,000, and then Adopt Harbor and Beach Park, $50,000. So we're talking 75 there.
75K.
Yes, sir.
Number 4.
And the last one was the roadways, the circles, and sidewalks for 600,000. So what we're looking at is now additional 875,000.
Yeah, peanuts.
Which would put us at maybe 0.9 additional mills on top of what we're recommending. So perhaps back above 3.3, just shy of 3.3. 3.37, excuse me. So what we'll do, we'll draft this up tomorrow, put in the numbers. Again, we'll wait though, however, till the new number comes in, because obviously that will have a significant change, and then next week we can share it with the council and we can be prepared for the 18th where we need to set our millage cap.
Okay. All right.
Responding to 2 speakers, do you want to at least calculate what a bump in the trust contribution would be if the advice was followed?
We pay $260 right now a year.
So it's double that.
It would be the additional $260. Again, I think we'd want to put this program in place before we commit to it. I'd like to see,
Sure.
Money where their mouth is. But I think it's maybe even bigger than that. It may be a park conservancy, which will maybe able to assist us not just for land acquisition, but for our existing parks as well. So I think that's a conversation we need to have. And I think we had 2 people come up here, and I think I'm going to reach out to both of them, bring them in, and let's talk if this is in the realm of idea or whether it's in the realm of reality. I think that's where we really need to go.
Yeah. I'll tell Steve you did your job.
Okay.
You go home now.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nothing else, Mr. Mayor?
Occasion.
Any other slides or questions?
No, just the backup slides that you have, they're in your packet.
Never again.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We're done.
For the good of the order?
Thank goodness we don't live in Chicago. We don't live in Chicago.
What's happening in Chicago?
The air quality is horrible in the Midwest. I'm going to
Can we adjourn?
Yes.
All right, we're adjourned.
This will be my first trip back in 15 years.